the other show you did, which I'm blanking on.
Portlandia?
That's it. Which was hilarious. Fucking hilarious.
Thanks.
That's a different environment for you.
Yeah.
That's a, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to take pointed shots at sort of the woke mindset and take, because listen, I'm as liberal as anybody, and you know that. I mean, I am on the record about gun control, and I was against the Iraq War.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you see what's going on in Portland with the people up there and the attitude, it's almost the opposite of liberalism, which is now an orthodoxy that says what you can and can't say. And what Portlandia did was it took direct fire at that.
No.
Blew them out of the fucking water.
It's been a while since we've done this show. So,
but the show's, not that long ago. It couldn't have been more than 4 years ago.
Yeah, maybe 5 years ago or something. But we weren't taking aim at anything.
Fred, in television time, that's yesterday.
Okay, well.
Hi, my name is Ben Burgess. This is our super producer, Jake Appett. And that was a pretty good that was a pretty good extraction of the essence of Club Random.
Yeah, I when Ben proposed this as a stream, I actually got into Club Random more first from the parody that Tim did. If you watch the whole thing, it's really good because it gets into the subtleties of a lot of Bill's stuff. But in that clip, he's capturing how he's just like completely dismissive of what Fred Armisen is trying to say, and he's like, no, like that show was on the air yesterday.
Yeah, I've only watched a little bit of Club Random. I saw the Marianne Williamson thing. I don't know if you caught that.
I caught some clips. Yeah,
me too. But yeah, she said basically Bill said that as far as he could tell from like going around in his day-to-day life, everybody was doing fine economically.
Yeah, yes.
Like, Bill, who do you hang out with? He was like, no, it's fine. She was like, well, you don't go to Skid Row, do you? He was like, well, come on. Okay, sure.
He's like, I think he said, why would I ever go there?
Yeah, exactly. So it's I have seen, like, I've been watching this guy on TVs for a very, very, very long time. I can actually remember Politically Incorrect back when that was still on the air. I would catch that sometimes, which, this is also in the era when, I don't know if you've ever had an elderly person explain this to you, Jake, but like there's there weren't any streaming services. You just had, there was just something called TV, and you just watch whatever happened to be on TV.
Pretty soon I'm going to be in my 40s, but I'm 32, but before you know it, you're going to be like, back in the prehistoric times, I'm going to be like, man, I watched VHS when we're less than 10 years apart, but yes.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, no, like, and this is one of the, like, a lot of the ridiculous things about Bill Maher and his views and all that have remained constant over time. Yes. But some of them have actually gotten worse. One of the things that's gotten worse is his complete indifference to anything that somebody he's interviewing says that complicates the narrative that he's going for.
Yeah. And I'm going to be honest, I've kind of always, well, at least ever since I've been on the left, I really dislike Bill Maher just because he's, rather unfunny in my opinion, and he's so smug. He's actually a lot more palatable on Club Random, and part of the reason is that I think he's drunk and high or high. And I heard he explained, I think, to John Hamm on an episode, like why, don't quote me, I think it was with John Hamm, but he was like, why did he do this show? And he was saying basically like, my friends are like, they see me all buttoned up on Real Time, and they're like, Bill, you're not like this, this isn't the real Bill. So he's like, I wanted to show, people what I'm really like, which is like, without writers, he's just far dumber. But it's like, this, I don't know, he's such a buffoon because usually he's drunk, he's high, he's like sinking in the chair often. I think what Tim captured really well is like, why are there so many drinks on such a small table? He's always like fiddling with like the ice and pouring things and like ignoring you, but he really just feels like your uncle or something. I think seeing him on that big budget HBO talk show, it feels a lot more oppressive to me versus here. He's just, basically drunk uncle. So it's a lot more palatable, actually. I could sit through. This is why I think I could sit through this with you, because he's just a lot sillier.
Yeah, I mean, like his least palatable on the HBO show has always been the stuff where he's like the pre-prepared bits, right? Like if he's just talking, then it's like bad in its own way. But if he's delivering pre-prepared material in some way, that's, for my taste at least, where it gets just god awful. Sometimes because of the quality of the material, but even when it's not, because like he started to do this thing a lot more in recent years where he'll like get mad at the audience if they don't think something's funny.
Yeah, that's kind of a beginner comedian move, right? I saw this video that was like all the different ways that a comedian can react to a joke bombing, and anger is definitely one of them. But I guess he feels like he's entitled to laughs. I on another Club Random, he was explaining like his stand-up comedy philosophy, and he was explaining to Quentin Tarantino that he gets what's called character laughs, which he thinks are the highest form of laughs. And the example of like a joke that gets a laugh from the audience is, I'm not quoting exactly, but I think, he says, I've never been one to criticize religion. And the audience cracks up. And he's like, that's a character laugh because they know me. So he's presenting it as this, super smarmy way, like this is the peak of comedy. And yeah, that's the type of jokes he makes. But I do think that I've been very interested in him because I've known, most people I think that I've known over, let's say 55 in recent years, I've found out are either like a medium fan of Bill Maher or a big fan. I think he's really catnip to he really encapsulates a certain boomer mindset, in my opinion. And he's like, it's like a lot of it is just attitude without really direction toward that attitude. You know what I mean? Without much substance behind it, but it's just the attitude itself, which seems very specific to people above a certain age, that I think I do find interesting. So I'm happy that there's this podcast that is a bit more palatable where I could kind of study him, because I can't I can't watch that show.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, to be honest, I usually only watch, like I used to watch the HBO show, all the time. I'm not particularly proud to admit, had a sometime like kind of, I don't know, in like the late Obama years, I kind of realized that it was just kind of habit, right? That I didn't really enjoy what I was watching. And then like the early Trump stuff that I did catch was just totally unwatchable, and I stopped. At this point, I think I pretty much only watch the HBO show when people that I actually know are on it. And, I'm like, oh, hey, Danny Messner's on Bill Maher, like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty bad, but yeah, Bill is this, I don't know. I mean, he's very unfunny. He's very smug. He has sort of very mediocre centrist opinions, which I actually don't think have changed that much over the years, honestly. Like I think the world has gotten a little bit better, and he's
very quick to tell you that I haven't changed. This is not liberalism. And of course, you agree a little bit with some of his critiques, but he's just so old man yelling at cloud and unnuanced about them that I would take those critiques from somebody else much more interesting. I'd be much more interested.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think some of the stuff he's reacting to does deserve to be critiqued. He's definitely giving the least interesting version of it, and most repetitive version of it. And it's also like, look, I mean, I wrote an article year or so ago for the Daily Beast, where I said, basically, they asked if I wanted to write something about Bill Maher. I was like, yeah, sure, and like the essential point was like, he's kind of right when he says he hasn't changed. Like, he has kind of always sucked. Like, if you go back and think about, the kinds of things he was saying, even back around the time the HBO show started. I mean, like, he was critical of the Iraq War, less so than he sometimes makes it sound like.
Yeah, I think Tim did a good job of how he just trots that out. It's like, I'm as liberal as anybody, right? Like, that's not.
Yeah,
I don't need that.
I mean, I was actually watching him back. He was like a lot more milquetoast on Iraq than like.
Well, he hates Muslims. Sorry to cut you off, but right, like
exactly, yeah. No, I mean, super duper. Like, he was like, all of his early war on terror stuff is just like super duper Islamophobic, and it's and even like way after early war on terror, like that's I'd say things like, well, I think it's okay, it's okay to be worried that the most common name for babies in whatever area it was is Mohammed, and stuff like, which is also whatever. It's stupid on multiple levels, but yeah, he said, he was certainly all in on the general framework of the war on terror. He was certainly all in on Afghanistan. He was like a little bit against the war in Iraq, less so than he makes it sound like in retrospect. And also in a way that's very reminiscent of, it's like the Obama kind of reason for being against the war in Iraq, that it's like, oh, this is going to distract us from Afghanistan. Like, there was stuff like that in the mix, right? It wasn't all that, but like, it was definitely more the sort of pragmatic liberal concerns about whether it was a good idea than the sort of, more substantive, hey, it's not okay for the United States to, go around bombing and invading other people's countries, sort of critique of the Iraq War. And yeah, I mean, he's had his moments. I mean, he's sort of, there have been times over the decades when he's drifted in like a little bit of a better direction, like he kind of like Bernie the first time, whatever. But like, I think the sort of overall worldview has always been kind of the most annoying kind of liberalism, that this sort of, I mean, it's really hard to describe it without just reusing that word smug a lot, but that it is very apt. So
I think we should get into two things real quick. Is one, I don't want to leave you completely out to dry, because I just remembered that I watched his movie. It came out my freshman year of college. It's Originalist. Is that how you say it? I loved it. So I remember I loved it at the time. I was probably about 17. So I don't want to, come out here in front that I never enjoyed Bill Maher content. I was like, wow, he really took it to those random people that he was dunking on about religion. I think, there is funny stuff in Religulous, but it is also like, a manifesto for like kind of the most annoying kind of new atheism. Yeah, and I was at the time 17. I think you grow up a little and realize, or maybe maybe not everyone does, but like kind of the whole Ben Shapiro shtick of taking down. Right. The Daily Show does this too sometimes, just to call balls and strikes, where you just take down random people and like destroy them, and it's like, all right, it's kind of easy. But I think there's a little. As smug and angry and talking over as he is, I think there's a little bit of Joe Roganitis on this show, where he tends to agree with people more than you would think. Like he'll say like, I don't agree with you. And then like even Marianne Williamson, I think like she pushed back a little bit. And he's like, all right, yeah, I guess you're right. Like John Hamm on the show was talking about how he's like, the 50s are the good old days, but as people call it the good old days, but really, men were beating their wives like crazy, and also the progressive income tax was way higher, and no one minded then. And Bill's just like, yeah, I guess you're right. He doesn't like push back on almost like what's a social democratic, maybe even like a Bernie talking point. So I think we'll see, but I feel like he has this super confrontational vibe, but then he kind of just agrees a little bit at the end of the day. He's kind of weak with that, maybe because he has no arguments.
I think there is definitely something to that. I also think that there is like a kind of some social democratic stuff that he's not necessarily super unfriendly to.
Yeah.
Like I think he's the kind of liberal for whom the talking point, this way we could be more like the European countries, has a lot of sway because he likes to think of himself that way. I'm like a smart European, not a dumb American, and so that's the kind. But like on the other hand, he also really, really likes dunking on the left for being like immature and ridiculous. So those two imperatives are always kind of balanced whenever he's talking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
We should say just a word about Vivek.
Yes, like cake.
Vivek, like cake. Ramaswamy, right? Because this is the other reason we wanted to, I think we were both like fascinated to watch this. Is that Vivek is just such a delightful weirdo. He is, like. Okay, so for example, I watched this clip of him, I think speaking at a rally in Iowa, and he had this like list of like, here are the things we know are truths or whatever, and a lot of them are the kinds of things you'd expect from somebody in a Republican primary in 2023. So there's a lot of, there are only two genders and shit like that. But like one of the first ones was God is real, which is also odd because it's like, okay, well, not to put too fine a point on it, like the which one, right? Like most of the audience, I believe, in a Republican campaign event in Iowa is not going to be made up of Hindus.
No, and he's actually had to come out and say that he believes in one God because of that. He's like, I believe in one God, and he had a very socially conservative Christian piano teacher, I think, when he was young, who potentially influenced his social views growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was reading about him. So it is an interesting tension there. It's like, he's like, this country was founded on Judeo-Christian values. It's a tight
Judeo-Christian or whatever, close enough. Yeah. I mean, I also wonder about that because I know there's like a lot of, Hinduism is a hugely big tent, but like there's a lot of stuff where you sort of say, well, there are all these gods, but ultimately it's all just kind of aspects of one God or whatever. And I wonder if he means something like that. So that's weird. The fact that he wants to disenfranchise everybody under 25 and then let them have the right to vote back if they serve in the military, a la Starship Troopers, is extremely delightfully weird. The fact that he, the fact that he's both an ultra conservative presidential candidate and a rapper is at least notable. So, this is, I don't know. I mean, look, I admitted on Twitter earlier today that the question of exactly why we want to watch this is maybe best left to psychiatry, but but I do really want to see it.
Yeah, let's start it. Two quick things just from the Wikipedia, because I'm sure he won't mention when Ben says he's a rapper, he literally was a libertarian rapper in college, I believe, that would rap about libertarian concepts. He's also he's a big Trump supporter, which makes his running against Trump interesting. And the other thing is that I don't have time to go into all of the ins and outs, but he basically became rich off of this pharmaceutical company that bought up patents from other pharmaceutical companies. And eventually one of their big drugs, I think, just didn't work. And the company lost a ton of money, and he was basically insulated from losing that much money. And then his company, Roivant, the last sentence on the Wikipedia page, the Wikipedia section about that is, Roivant has never been profitable. He made hundreds of millions of dollars from it. He says he does not regret what happened, but he wished it hadn't turned out that way, but he thinks he took on too much criticism about that. Maybe he'll talk to Bill about this, but then this next thing, which really got him more into politics, is The company established a nonprofit social impact arm, Roivant Social Ventures, which basically tried to work against DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and against environmental, social, and corporate government initiatives. So he raised millions of dollars from like JD Vance and I think Thiel to be like an anti-woke activist. So let's see if he talks about that. He might. I don't think he'll mention the failed company that made him. I
really like the pharmaceutical company that whose business plan is buying patents from other pharmaceutical companies. I mean, that is just like, if there's a single sentence that's going to make you feel good about our healthcare system, that would be it. But yeah, let's get going.
Hey,
Bill,
here?
I'm here.
I knew you would be.
How you doing, brother?
How are you?
He always shows up after.
Yeah.
Like, what is he doing?
Something from my garden.
Oh, that's nice.
Nice.
It does look nice, yeah.
Have you ever seen a zucchini that big? I think it's a little better than nice.
It's substantial. Yeah.
Well, Jesus Christ.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I was talking to quite such a stud that you find
Why won't he let him
really
take it?
substantial.
Oh, that's good. No,
are you kidding? Have you just been at the Iowa State Fair or something?
I've been hanging out there a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't they have like biggest vegetable
I think
prizes? Wouldn't this?
I think you got to go there and compete. Have you ever been to Iowa?
No, I don't want to go there. I just want you to admit that this is like
it's very impressive.
Thank you.
The chairs are always so
it's
big.
very
Well, it's yours because I heard you hadn't eaten.
Zucchini, I'm gonna take it with me.
No.
I'm gonna take it with me.
They look so
Well,
tiny
they
in the
said you were
chair.
hungry
Yeah. Well, I'll
because you're like on the go
all the time, man. Yeah.
See, this is what's
We're having
great.
fun, but
This is what's so advantageous about running for president when you're 38. Because I remember 38. And I still run around the country, but I couldn't do it like that now. I mean, you really.
But you've been through that phase. You know what
absolutely.
it's like a little bit.
And you can just run your body ragged 24/7, especially I'm sure you don't drink or, I mean, you're
not try to not have too many vices. Yeah.
But do you think it should be legal nationally?
I think that we should align the federal law with the state law. I think it undermines the rule of law that
So
we
that
have.
means yes?
Yeah, it means yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's so silly now.
It's a joke. It's a farce.
It's a joke that I have to look up when I'm going to a state. And by the way, I don't even do it anymore because I figure if they're going to get me in Oklahoma for having this with me, they'll be the ones who are embarrassed, not me.
Well, also, here's the thing, though, is when you have different standards of law, like when you have that look the other way and sweep it under the rug, that's when you actually get an unfair state that can target people for saying the wrong thing, thinking the wrong thing. I don't like what you did here.
Right.
I got to throw the statute book at you, and then we're going to do something where we otherwise don't charge it.
And historically,
That's what they do.
racism
Historically.
hid behind states' rights.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
this
of course.
was part of our past.
Right.
And today, I think
Right.
Political discrimination, I think, is the new equivalent of unfairness in the law that we've seen for racism in maybe decades and centuries past.
Well, I will say this, where I think
Also,
we're
the camera
fairly in
angles
agreement
are
on.
also
I keep
weird.
saying my mantra is let's live in the year we're living in.
Yeah.
Because so many people seem to, on the left, this is a left thing, they seem to want to insist on having our deplorable past permanently stand in for our much improved present, which doesn't mean there isn't work to be done. There certainly are still racists in America and racism.
You hear that? It was a Cottonmouth where the S's are. He's like visibly fucked up already, and Vivek is painfully sober. Not that he's thinking clearly, but he's obviously there for a reason. And Bill is just indifferent, fucked up.
What I liked that
really
detail,
weird.
I was like, they told me you were hungry. So Vivek is like sitting there waiting impatiently for the interview to start.
And then he brings him a giant.
And Bill is high, and he wanders in after it's already filmed. He brings in a giant zucchini,
And then he
spends 5 minutes talking about how mad he is that Vivek won't acknowledge how impressive the zucchini is. Which also, yes, there's subtext there. We don't need to, we can tastefully leave that on the table. But
he won't let him. How? Like, what person hands somebody a present and then won't let them take the present? That's like 5-year-old behavior. Like, you learn like as from the age of a small child. Like, he hands it and then he won't let him have it. And he's like,
no. I will let you have this when you acknowledge that it's the greatest zucchini you have ever seen.
That's a good point. Yeah,
it's also on the substance. Vivek just said something insane that I'm sure not for the last time in this conversation is just kind of allowed to go by with, and look, I've been in a lot of conversations with crazy people. You can't stop the conversation and like follow up on every single thing that comes out of their mouths. But right out the gate, like first, other than legalizing weed, and yes, it's very funny that in 2023, even the extreme right-wing candidates are for that. But other than that, the first substantive opinion that Vivek offered in this conversation is that political discrimination now is like, as he said, the equivalent of racial discrimination in like decades past. So like, I'm sure he could point to instances that are bad or whatever, but like, I mean, it just seems like that would be an obvious, hold on, man. Do you know like what the US was like before the Civil Rights Act? Like what do you think is going on now to conservatives or whatever that you think is remotely equivalent to that?
I mean, what is political discrimination like against conservatives?
I would assume so. Cause I mean, otherwise just given who Vivek is, I assume that's what he means. I assume
let's see what he gets into. But he had a quote recently that a lot of people were dunking on, where he was like, where was he from? Fucking Harvard or Yale? I get this confused. Yale Law School and Harvard College. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I believe. Fun fact I learned today, by the way. Mm-hmm. Do you know who one of his law school classmates was?
No. Who is it?
Actual non-ironic friend of the show, current affairs editor Nathan J. Robinson.
Oh, okay. They were forged in the same fire, and then they went on different paths.
Nathan's told me that earlier today. He was like, "Yeah, I didn't know him. I kind of hated everybody there."
But yeah, he was saying, when I was at Harvard, consider the plight of like the kind of overweight, nerdy conservative guy versus, let's say, like a black basketball player at Harvard. Like, everyone's gonna like the basketball player more. And everyone was like, so you're talking about a jock in one of the most popular sports in America who's, in college versus like an out of shape dork who's always like probably, also a libertarian rapper. It was just like, if that's what you're concocting to say that there's political discrimination, it's like you literally picked like the coolest archetype of a person that you could possibly pick. So it was just
because God knows, like, you go back and watch movies set in the 1980s, and there's no evidence that in that era of American history, like athletes in popular sports did better socially than fat nerds.
Yeah, I mean, at least take a fat nerd of both races and see who does better. I have a suspicion.
I mean, we can at least do the fat liberal nerd and the fat conservative nerd, or the conservative basketball player and the liberal basketball player. But like, I don't know, like just merging those factors, it seems like very sloppy methodology to me.
I'm about to start it, but I will say I think a really good lab-grown presidential candidate would be a conservative Harvard African American basketball player. So I think that, like, with Vivek's politics would be really good. I think that conservatives would really eat that up. All right, let's do this.
Let's go.
But I feel like we are very often not treating it like, oh, this is 2023 now, and this is where we are. This is the work that has to be done. But let's not be chasing these phantoms of racism that aren't the parts that exist anymore.
Yeah, and I think that we can celebrate that.
Yeah, we should.
I think that we should celebrate
Progressives
that,
should.
right? I think that we all should. We're all, I mean, in some ways, I am pro-progress, right? Does that make me a progressive, a conservative? I don't know what those labels are, but I'm pro-progress. And so I think that the fact that what I tell some people, often friends on the left is, have we been hypocritical for most of our national history? Yes, we have. But our worst hypocrisies.
Hypocritical, you mean like all men are created equal?
Yeah, that we don't live up to. And the point I was getting to is those hypocrisies are our best evidence that we have ideals at all. Right? Nobody calls Iran a hypocrite.
That's a great point.
Nobody calls China a hypocrite. You can't call them a hypocrite because to be a hypocrite, you had to have the ideals in the first place. So then they have ideals. Now, are we a nation of gods or are we a nation of men? We're a nation of human beings, okay?
Right.
Human beings are by definition flawed. So if you have a nation built on ideals and it's comprised of human beings and not angels, then you will fall short of those ideals. It's just like definitionally what happens.
No,
but at least we have ideals.
Right.
That's what my
and also that we do improve.
Yeah.
That, this is what's so annoying about, I've done many editorials about this, just like, again, just live in the year we're living in and stop like going after Columbus and like, yes, people were atrocious back then. He committed atrocities.
I mean, there are elements of Columbus that we ought to admire and still celebrate today.
We wouldn't be here. Well, I guess we would. Somebody would have found found it eventually. It's so big. But
it's the spirit of exploration, the spirit of being the unafraid, right? That's what we take on.
To have the balls to get into 3 little wooden ships that are probably the size of this room.
And to just go.
When you didn't know what was on the other side.
Or you thought India was on the other side, is what you thought.
But it was a theory.
You had no idea. Yeah.
Everybody else said,
off.
They said, you will fall off the edge of the world. Mm-hmm. That's right. But, the reason they did it was because, before when the trade had to go through the Middle East, if you wanted to trade with China, like Marco Polo, you had to go through the Middle East, and it's called the middle because they were literally middlemen. Like all the trade went through.
Totally.
And Columbus basically said, I would rather fall off the edge of the world than have to deal with those people.
And the deserts and
getting my
the
silk
conditions
through one more day.
I mean, these guys were the pioneers, the explorers, and even the founding fathers had that spirit. Like, take another guy who has that spirit, Thomas Jefferson. Right? You have this historical view of Columbus.
He's bad. He's
evil. He had slaves.
He was fucking one of them.
Yeah, more than one, I think, is actually the accurate truth. But the reality is, he's also a guy. So people say I'm young running for president. I'm 38. You know how old he was when he wrote the Declaration of Independence?
12.
33.
Oh.
Yeah, split the difference.
That was close.
Yeah, but give him credit.
Well, yes, you're right.
That was kind of funny, actually.
He's writing the Declaration of Independence, and he decides that he needs a swivel chair. And I feel like I could use a swivel chair right now, but he decides he needs a swivel chair. So he invented it.
Who did?
Thomas Jefferson.
Invented the swivel chair?
Yes.
I thought Franklin was the inventor.
Well, Franklin was also an inventor. He invented the Franklin stove. He invented the bifocal spectacles. Franklin's case, he actually invented one of the earliest remedies for the common cold. So all of these guys, they weren't like the kinds who said, oh, no, you're not an expert. You're not trained in that. They just said, we're going to do it. We're going to figure it out.
What remedy?
We're going to do it.
What's the cold remedy?
It was something that it was like a home brew, but it worked.
And it still works?
I think there have been, I will say this. There has not been a good, like, for all the things the pharmaceutical industry has created.
Just want to say 2 things really quickly here. One is, it is a little bit funny in the whole discussion of Columbus. There was never any but like all the people he found on the island who he enslaved and like wiped out, that's not great. Like, you'd think just for the sake of completeness that would be in there somewhere. So that's, whatever. I guess that is what it is. 2, less substantively, but just on the dynamic of the conversation, I really like that, Vivek, as you say, is like stone cold sober right now. And, he's just like running through his talking points. And Bill, I guess we are seeing the real Bill Maher because like Bill is just kind of genially high And, he's like, what? He invented something? I thought Franklin was the one who, oh, wow. Well, how did it work? The remedy, the cold remedy. Like, it's just, these are just the questions you ask if you just have no interest in like what he's building to.
Yes, it's very much like when you're trying to tell like your parents a story, and they just and they just start diverting into directions that you're like, so you knew her from high school? Oh yeah, she was in high school. Remember she was your friend that would always come over, and she always had the dirty shirt, right? And you're like, no, but the point is that I'm trying to get to is that. And he's like sociopathically running through these insane talking points, and it's kind of also when you're talking to an older person, just get him on a subject like Christopher Columbus, like because Bill was like, Christopher Columbus, we know he was horrible, and then Vivek is like, but he's also great, and then Bill's like,
Sure.
yeah, exactly. So
also, yes, Strom, you're correct. 0 educated people in Europe were flat earthers in 1492. I mean, going back to like the ancient Greeks, like it was widely known that was not true. So yeah, whatever. That's whatever. I would think that the larger point though would be like, again, I just some kind of acknowledgement in passing that slavery and genocide were bad. Might not hurt in that part of the discussion. I mean, presumably their argument is, but by the standards of the time, it was fine, and the people at the time who objected don't count. But whatever. Yeah, I do. Yes, I think that the parent story, that's exactly it. Let's keep going.
I think this is an earnest comment directed at us. It's a little bit ironic given who we're interviewing, but I will say, because you're saying lefties are always laughing at people on the right, I'm not even really laughing at Vivek here as much as just the dynamic between
no. Right now, Bill is being much funnier than Vivek.
Yeah. It's
way more of the laughter is directed at Bill than Vivek, because look, Vivek is just like running through some conservative arguments, and that's like, I don't agree with his point, but I mean, he's just being a normal politician. I mean, the funny part is Bill being the like just the very high boomer, who like can't quite follow the thread of the conversation.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep going. Just so I clarify.
A cure for the common cold is not on the list.
Right. And
so we haven't gotten further along than Benjamin Franklin did.
And the shit that the pharmaceutical companies sell to treat it, the NyQuil
was far worse for you than what Benjamin Franklin came up with.
And
he's a pharmaceutical
in the long run, worse for the cold.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it might treat immediate symptoms a little bit or something, but I mean, some of that stuff. And look, I've
designed to knock you out so you forget about it.
I hate to do anything like that, but like the one symptom I had when I had COVID was I had a stuffy nose for a couple of nights. That was really.
Are you stuffy right now?
No.
Okay.
Why? Do I sound it?
You sound a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I've got that 24-hour COVID. No problem. No. No. So I did reach for the nasal spray because it was just easier to sleep if I cleared my passages. But I didn't know that about Benjamin Franklin, huh?
Franklin and Thomas Jefferson.
And well, Jefferson, Franklin, I kind of knew, but I didn't know what Jefferson, I did. I guess they were all.
He didn't correct him. He's just like, and also Thomas Jefferson.
No. That's a good instinct. Yes, they had to be like, no. Bill, remember you were surprised a minute ago that it was Jefferson, not just Franklin.
I think he just misspoke. But this is pretty good, actually. I'm liking this.
Well, see, the Franklin stove is named after Benjamin.
Yeah,
Franklin.
back then there was something called the Renaissance man.
Yes,
and a Renaissance man meant you did everything. That's
and
why
we have
that's
lost
not.
That.
Of course,
so I'm into that.
You're a Renaissance man.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't call myself a Renaissance man, but I respect the ideal, and yes, I do have diverse
interests. You aspire
interests.
to that, yes.
Yeah, and I aspire to be good at different things, right?
Like
I'm not some box that you check in some sort of ordered society. I'm me, and I will have multiple.
A Renaissance man, could speak many languages. Yeah. He knew archery. He knew horsemanship.
Sports. Could be the same guy who plays music, piano.
Music, sword fighting.
So I try to do this on the campaign trail. It sort of gets under my team's, makes them nervous sometimes. But we'll play the piano. We show up. Play college kids in tennis. when I travel across the country. We'll get the best college players in the local college tennis team, hit with them. I rapped to Eminem at the Iowa State Fair.
I saw that. Don't do that again.
Oh, why not?
Because it didn't turn out well for Kendall Roy on Succession. When
I didn't get to that part of it.
Oh, well, he rapped at his father's birthday party. And
really?
Guys who are not rappers rapping, it's just, I'm telling you,
hold on.
as a friend.
But my view, Bill, is
wasn't that like the first episode of Succession, or am I getting mixed up?
I don't remember. I think it might not be. I think it was later. I think it was later. But
no, you're right. Because the first episode was also his dad's birthday. But yeah, you're right. The rap was much later. All right, fair enough. I thought Vivek was claiming he hadn't made it all the way through the first episode, and
I kind of respect Bill for being such an asshole to somebody's face. I gotta admit, it's kind of funny.
Kind of do what I feel like doing at that moment.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's kind of my
I know, but when
and that's the spirit of our Renaissance.
Okay, but I don't want
to invent the swivel chair. I'll invent the swivel chair. That's kind of where I'm at.
The idea of president, I do what I want at whatever moment, is not like an appealing thing. I see why your team is trying to take you away. Just the rapping. Tennis is great, but
well, tennis is more fun anyway. So that's where I'm at on that.
Right.
But my point is, I think we have lost that spirit. Right, our inner animal spirit as a country, the people who run it, it has been caged. It's been tamed. It's been domesticated by this culture that celebrates vulnerability, victimhood, and penalizes the pursuit of excellence and being free. And my view is, I think it's a mentality that now we're doing well in the polls. When I was at 0.0%, I said the same thing. I'd rather just tell people in this country who I am and what I stand for. If they want to vote for me, fine.
Oh yeah, you definitely.
And if they don't, then don't. I will be very comfortable with that decision.
Well, I mean,
but I wish I would wish for more politicians to step up and embrace that.
Right, but like whatever you're getting, 7%. No one's taking that seriously. Like someone with 7%. Now, could you be president? Yes, things could change. But this is the time when you're at 7. I've seen this before with politicians, when you can say anything because no one's paying that much of attention. And it's not like, well, he's not going to, this guy's not going to be president. I know he's a kook who thinks we should get rid of the FBI and the IRS, which is kooky.
So you've studied it's not kooky, actually. I'll explain to you why it's not kooky.
It's the FBI?
Yeah, let me explain that to you right now.
Who's going to collect taxes and catch kidnappers? You?
So let's talk FBI, actually. You want to talk FBI?
Oh, geez. Yes, please.
I'm impressed. No, you've been reading the platform.
I do this for a living.
This
Hello,
is
you've been on my show,
this is
right?
Good. Yeah, but
you know who I am?
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm up on political stuff.
Yeah. You're up into political stuff, but this is getting into the details. So shutting down the FBI.
Well, that's a pretty big detail. Get rid of the FBI?
Yeah, I would shut it down, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, Jesus.
You ready to have an open? You're an open-minded guy.
I'm listening.
I know you. You'll listen. So that's why I'm bothering with this, right? By the way, I have a book recommendation for you.
It's just in the future on the show, anytime any of us know something that the others don't expect, and they're okay, cool, right? Like take all kinds of offense to it. It's like, what? You don't think I know stuff?
Yeah. He's like, is there anything about the way I presented myself tonight that makes you think maybe I didn't prepare for that? like he's I think legitimately surprised he read his platform. Although I think he's doing a subtle dig at him as well.
Yeah, I mean, yes. When I came in after the cameras had already started rolling, already clearly high, demanding that you acknowledge how amazing my zucchini was. Like you didn't get the impression that I just come from my desk where I was like poring over all the details of your policy proposals.
Yeah, all right. Let's see what he's got for us.
Before I get to it, G-Man, government man. It's the history of the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover's History of the FBI. You read that book, that will already open your heart and mind to the argument I'm about to make.
I'm already reading a book about cross-dressers, so I can't.
Okay, well,
no, I'm kidding,
this can come next.
No.
Okay,
go ahead.
Cross-dressers are important too, but the gist is this: The FBI is a failed institution. It is at once politicized, corrupt, and has been in many ways designed to be corrupt. J. Edgar Hoover designed it that way. The same FBI that threatened Martin Luther King with suicide, blackmailing him over incorrectly collected tapes, is now targeting its domestic terrorists for people who show up at concerned parents of school board meetings. So in some ways, this is built in by design.
That's coming from the FBI?
Yeah, it's coming from the FBI. Now, here's an answer to this, okay? At the local level, you've got local cops and you've got local prosecutors. You don't have a separate bureaucracy sitting in between. Well, now let's talk about the federal level. You've got the U.S. Marshals, and then you've got the DOJ. The DOJ has its issues, but I think the president can reform that through good appointments. You don't need this.
How is he already pouring more liquid? Like, how is he? All right, sorry. I'm actually
a fast rate. I mean, like earlier, I thought maybe he was just putting more ice in, but yeah, that's interesting.
I watched someone else mentioned Tim Heidegger's parody. I thought he was like overdoing how much he pours liquid, but I think you can't overdo it unless you're just spilling out all over your head. He's literally constantly while somebody's talking. Yeah. Anyway, I'm curious actually what you would say the left-wing take on what he's saying is, because like he's. Should we let him finish the thought first?
I mean, like I think the FBI is bad is probably going to be overlapped with what a lot of leftists would agree with. I don't particularly have a lot of faith that whatever Vivek would replace it with would be better, but let's watch.
Separate bureaucracy sitting in between. So I'll walk you through the math because I know you like details for this to be credible.
Well, certainly for this issue.
Yeah, for this issue, right? Because you brought it up.
I don't always like details.
35,000 employees at the FBI. 20,000 of them report into work at the J. Edgar Hoover building. Still, they celebrate his legacy. The J. Edgar Hoover building of the FBI they walk into. That's Washington. The bureaucratic rot. That's in D.C.
So you're saying 20,000 of the 35,000 FBI men work in Washington in the same. They fit 20,000 people in one building?
I mean, it's a giant building.
20,000 people?
In that building? I don't know how many of them show up in the post-COVID era for Zoom or whatever, and they have field offices.
Well, that is a big building.
But I'm saying are in back office functions. 15,000 of them.
He's literally more interested in the size of the building than the argument that the guy is making.
Honestly, like this conversation has made me. I mean, like this reminds me of listening to, in a very, very different way, right? But it's like the most sympathetic I've ever felt to Sam Harris was listening to that first interview he ever did with Jordan Peterson, where he spends like an hour trying to explain to Peterson, how things can be true because they correspond to reality, even if it's not convenient or whatever. And in a very different way, it's like, man, this conversation, I'm sure he's about to say some insane fascist shit, but man, this conversation has made me feel like, feel some sympathy for Vivek Ramaswamy of all people. Because like, he's going to make a point, and like Bill is just like, Bill is just being the incredibly high friend who like fixates on details that have absolutely nothing to do with anything.
It's also why he can't refute anybody's points on the show very well, because he's clearly not paying attention to the important parts. But let's see.
Our frontline agents. These are good people doing investigative work on drug crimes or sex trafficking or whatever it may be. They're not specialized at the FBI. So I've offered, if I may say it myself, unprecedented detail on how to get this done. Those 15,000 moved some of them to the U.S. Marshals, which have been far more effective at fighting child trafficking rings than the FBI. Move some of them to the DEA, which has been far more effective on the front lines of the fentanyl epidemic.
If you're going to get rid of an agency, why don't you get rid of that one? The DEA.
Well, actually, the investigative crime.
Dr. Drew and my wife Susan here. We want to show.
I had it on an incognito tab. Why don't maybe I should reopen it on. Oh no, there's going to be ads no matter what, right?
I guess.
Oh no, No, I have ad blocker on mine. Okay, so what's your analysis of what you heard so far? I'm just going to re-pull it up on.
Well, mostly I want to hear where Vivek's actually going and get past size of the FBI building, which I guess, to be fair, we did finally get to. But, that was my reaction to most of what I was listening to. We finally did get to some of his actual proposal. I think the DEA thing, I mean, again, Bill's reaction is kind of funny that, like, he just kind of sees things whizzing by that, like, intersect with his interest, and he jumps on them without thinking very, very much about how it relates to the larger arguments. It's like, ooh, DEA, don't like that. But there is a serious thing there, which is, like, why... why is it in principle that the federal marshals, or especially the fucking DEA, is better than the FBI? How is it better? I mean, like, if you sort of object to the idea of a national agency doing police work, which many people have, but if you object to that, then wouldn't that apply equally well to the DEA as the FBI? I mean, like, this just seems like, honestly, so far, this just seems like Vivek picking up on stuff that grassroots conservatives happen to be mad about right now, and find a way to pander to it. That, because Donald Trump fought with the FBI, because of the, FBI agents who came up a bunch in the Mueller investigation, and because of the raid on Mar-a-Lago and all that stuff, they're all mad at the FBI because of political bias or whatever. And so he wants to cater to that. And he's like, okay, how can I have, like, a proposal that doesn't sound crazy so I can abolish the FBI? But right. I mean, it just seems like, in terms of any more substantive reason that you wouldn't like the FBI, I just don't understand why this is supposed to be better.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going into the details of why like the DEA is better, but I mean, I guess, like, we're going to get into a little clash here over drug law enforcement.
Crime. I mean, we have laws in this country, so you could debate whether you like the laws or not. But I'm saying, as long as you have the laws, we're talking about effectiveness here. And my point is, the FBI is broken. Take financial crimes.
So you're saying the 20,000 people who work in Washington, they are all superfluous?
I can't tell you that every one of them to the last T is, but I've got 4 years to first term. I got to move quickly.
Yeah, I think you just...
And so I say, chop it off, shut down the FBI, move them to the U.S. Marshals, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury, to the Secret Service, which has...
This is also something Matt was telling me a little while ago, I think when I was on Left Reckoning after the Mar-a-Lago raid, that this is sort of a weird conservative meme that because, okay, they don't like the FBI basically because of the politics of the FBI and Donald Trump, but they're a little bit torn because obviously if there's one thing that the right wing generally likes, it's cops. So, how is it that you could reconcile that with not liking these particular cops? And apparently the resolution for a lot of people, Matt was saying, is that you say, well, it's the desk guys who are bad. The actual, like, what do they call them? Like the door slammers or something. The door busters. The guys who are out there busting down doors. Like, those are good. It's the desk ones who are bad. And I don't know, maybe the day they raided Mar-a-Lago, they just sent a bunch of desk guys instead of the usual door guys. But this is also, I think, what's being reflected in what Vivek is saying here. That it's like, okay, well, you have 20,000 people at the FBI who work at. I mean, actually, if I had to guess, all right, no, Jamie, that's like. If I had to guess, he's probably getting a little bit confused about how many people work in, like, that one actual building. But, like, they're saying, like, more FBI agents work in the office than are, like, out doing field work at any given time. And so, like, I think that's the sort of, I mean, I think that's the thing he's pandering to. It's like, oh yeah, these, like, desk guys who are, like, all deep state institutional people who hate Trump, like, those are the bad guys, anybody who's out there doing cop stuff is good.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of a Frankenstein's monster, amalgamation of concepts that goes on with some of these positions that I feel like, without understanding the specific conservative pet peeves that they're addressing, just come across as weird, which is why I think it's happening to Bill too. Like, he's just like, what? There's that many people in the building? Like, what? He's just, like, kind of confused at what the point of it even is, because he's not the one that's being pandered to, I guess. But let's
Yeah.
see.
And some financial crime as well, and then to the DEA.
Okay,
That's the answer.
so here's something the FBI was involved with. So I'm asking who would handle this.
Yes.
Say an ally country like Australia.
Yep.
Has a tip, and we trust that they are an ally and the person is credible.
Yep.
And he has been talking to someone who got drunk in a bar and said he had information about how a foreign country, Russia, was trying to infiltrate our election. And he was placed in this candidate's operation. He was an operative for the person running for president. So the Australian diplomat tells the FBI. Do you think that's right?
Well, I think we could separately talk about the circumstances of that particular case. But you're saying somebody gets a tip.
Well, that's how the Trump Russia investigation happened.
Which, I mean, you could argue this in multiple ways, Bill.
Well, what I'm arguing is this.
You could say that actually is part of the corruption that led to.
Okay, but what I'm arguing is this, because this is what happened. Yeah. An Australian diplomat, somebody we trusted, said this guy, it was George Papadopoulos, I think was his name, was a little drunk one night, and he was telling him about how much the Trump campaign team was coordinating with the Russian government. Now we can argue the rest of the night about what happened after that. Of course, they did, but should that not be investigated by the FBI? And if not the FBI, I don't see how the federal marshals or who the Texas Rangers are going to handle that one.
I actually think U.S. Marshals would be a fine place if you move people to that
Really?
division. As a side, I mean, I'm going to resist the temptation to go down the rabbit hole of debating something that's like a dead horse that we needn't beat for what was, I believe, a deeply flawed Russia collusion narrative that went nowhere. But let's just talk about something like it, is your question, for the purpose of reorganizing the FBI.
We have facts that are, well, at least facts. We have the reports of 2 Republicans, right? We had the John Durham report, right?
We have a Durham report, yep.
And what was the one before that?
The Durham report was about the FBI's.
Horowitz.
Yeah, yeah.
They were both about the investigation of the investigation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The FBI opened this investigation into whether Trump was too involved with Russia. Let's just put it that way, based on this Australian tip. And of course, it turned out he was. His campaign manager was sharing polling data with a guy in the GRU.
But you know who else was too involved with Russia? Was the Hillary Clinton campaign.
That's ridiculous.
It was via the British guy, Christopher Steele, with the Russian disinformation operative, getting the golden shower story planted down, used as opposition party research.
That's a red
to get
herring,
a FISA.
and
I'm just saying both parties. Politics apparently is far dirtier than I ever imagined in both political parties.
I really like that this whole thing started because Bill got bored with Vivek talking about the FBI. And he was like, hey, you know what I'd really like to argue about? You know what I'm apparently not sick of yet? Russiagate.
Yeah, and I've kind of been marveling at Bill's vagueness about almost every topic. And then they get to Russiagate. And I'm going to be honest with you, Ben, I basically skipped. Russiagate, basically. So there's...
That was a really good instinct on your part.
Yeah. Well, do you remember that ClickHole article that was making fun of what Russiagate sounds like to people who don't know what the fuck? It was like, new report from Glorp says that Bertlebees, all these random names, and I feel like this is I'm getting a flashback to that, like Horowitz and Durham report, and I'm gonna be honest, we're out of my expertise here, but Bill seems.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, I should have skipped Russiagate. I did pay attention to it a little bit, mostly just because I was annoyed that my liberal friends were taking it more seriously than I thought they should have, and so I kept looking into it enough to be able to point out hey, I really don't think this is. I really don't think it's there for what you want this to be. And it's I don't know. This is a huge oversimplification. If you're watching this and you spent 5 years obsessing about Russiagate and you can tell me all the ways that this is wrong, please direct this to Jake. I don't want to hear it, but like it just seems like at the end of the day, it's like, okay, did the Russian government try a little bit to influence the election? Sure. Was that even like the top 10 countries who most effectively tried to tried to influence it in some way? Does Russia have more influence over American politics than, say, Saudi Arabia or Israel? Probably not, right? Like that seems very deeply unlikely to me. So yeah, I think it was all kind of dumb. I will say Vivek also dropped the ball because we just talked about the Steele dossier. I believe the information that went into that was, I think there's like a Ukrainian connection there. So he, if he'd wanted to, he could have actually pivoted to another one of his talking points here. But we did establish earlier that he was hungry at the beginning of the conversation, and inexplicably he decided not to just eat that raw zucchini.
I'd be so happy if he was munching on that like Bugs Bunny and a carrot, just so I can go to town on Bill's zucchini. This is getting really tedious, but I guess we're gonna get through it.
I just don't think it was good for the country, Bill, that we had that
but again,
inquiry for the
let's
first
go
2
back
years.
to what we can actually talk about for real.
Yeah, because this is just like ancient
No, because the 2 reports.
Okay.
The Durham report and they both said the same thing. And these are Republicans. At least Durham is.
I mean, to me, I could care less about the partisan distinction.
Well, everybody else cares about it. So let's not pretend you don't care.
Well, the reason I don't care because there's a lot of, I think about it as whether or not you're part of the managerial class or whether you're actually
that's not how
being accountable.
Well, that's important too, but also.
And that exists in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party alike.
But we are crazy partisan right now, and people only stick with their team, even when they know better.
I tell grassroots conservative audiences across this country, even when I go to places like Iowa, and this will surprise some people. I think it's unique to now. I tell hard conservative audiences that I could care less for the Republican Party. I really could. And I go to places like south side of Chicago.
That's not brave. That's how Trump got elected.
Well, I mean, I think here's something that's a little bit.
The Republican Party.
I'm not claiming to be brave. I'm just claiming to be where the country is right now. The country does not care as much for those partisan distinctions as the observers of politics would think. I went to the south side of Chicago. I went to Kensington in the inner city of Philadelphia. And those are places where Trump didn't go or where other Republicans don't go.
Good for you.
Well, the thing that I found is that here's what I will say. I've probably done hundreds of campaign events. I have not been in a room that was more hard line on 2 things, closing the southern border and ending the war in Ukraine, than an audience of 200, mostly 99% of them black Democrats in supposedly hardcore left.
Doesn't mean they're right.
Inner city of Chicago, which is interesting.
Doesn't mean they're right or it's not the right thing to do to keep funding the Ukrainian war.
We can come to that in a second, but my point was
one,
which is that the partisan boundaries on 2 of the most important issues of our time, probably the most important foreign policy question right now, is what we do with the war in Ukraine, and a fundamental issue relating to our southern.
He's kind of saying, take my word on it. I find that a little hard to believe that they care so much about closing this. The most hard line at closing the southern border. I mean, he doesn't have actual data to back that up.
Yeah, I am curious. It's also, I don't know. I mean, he went to an event and the crowd was really into it. Like, I don't really think that. I mean, I'm not even saying that he's necessarily wrong about where the center of gravity in that population is on either of those issues necessarily. I'd have to look at the polling, but it's not great methodology.
No, and if it sounds surprising, I think you kind of owe it to come up with something more than just trust me, they were super into it. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know this is a name that a lot of people have a lot of feelings about, but I always think about this old Glenn Greenwald article in Salon many years ago, where he'd posted this polling information showing that the U.S. perceptions of the U.S. hadn't gotten any better in the Arab world since the election of Obama. I think they might have even gotten worse, and how this was supposed to be part of what was going to change since Bush, and it hadn't happened. And a thing about Salon era Glenn Greenwald that sort of previewed a little bit coming attractions is that he really read the comments. He responded to a lot of comments, and In one of these comments, I remember this woman being like, "I don't think that's true. My niece just went to Egypt and they loved Americans there." And again, called balls and strikes. I still remember his response, which I thought was pretty good. It was like, okay, maybe we should just dispense with Poland and just send your niece to different countries to tell us what the people think. Like it has like a little bit of that flavor. Like, oh, I don't know, I did this rally in what did he say, south side of Chicago, someplace like that, and this statistically rigorous random sample of people who showed up to a Vivek Ramaswamy rally, like all really agreed with me. So therefore that proves something or other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of really quickly trying to pull up polling. This is terrible methodology as well, but I'm just pulling up polling about for polling Black Americans. Maybe the Black Americans in Chicago are specifically very hard line. But according to this poll of Black Americans by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, no idea what that is, but it says, when you vote for nationally elected officials, which of the following is the most important issue to you personally? Economy and jobs is at 29%, and immigration and foreign policy are second to last and last at 3% and 2%. So I would, I don't know, just the first poll I found does not seem to indicate that they are extremely hard line about this immigration issue. And I saw some other stuff that seems to imply that Black Americans might actually be more welcoming of immigrants to a certain extent. So I don't know. If we get a Jamie, maybe they could pull up some meta polls and stuff like that. But
or you could just like go out onto the street and like ask the first two Black guys you meet and just assume they're representative.
Yeah, the Family Feud style of political polls. All right, let's see where he's going.
Border, because they're turning South Shore High School into an encampment for migrants. It's a fascinating finding that no Republican has showed up there. Now, they differed from me drastically, and we had at it. One woman walked out and left when I'm against racial reparations. And so we have real disagreements. But the most, and I'm not exaggerating this, the most vehement agreement for militarizing the southern border and taking $200 billion to aid Ukraine for a community that says, wait a minute, A, this migrant's getting $7,000 per person per month in South Shore High School. B, we're sending $200 billion to some other country halfway around the world. What about me? And there are deep echoes of that in the non-establishment wing of the Republican Party as well, which is why I come back to the fact that, agree or not with the individual policy positions, I just don't think that right now, the moment we live in, R versus D captures it, which is inspiring, actually.
I mean, that is always the question when Republicans use this talking point. It's like, we're spending all this money on Ukraine that we're not spending on people who are struggling in this country. It's like, okay, you know what? I agree with you on both halves of that, but I think we should do de-escalation and peace talks in Ukraine. And obviously, I would rather money that's been spent on the military-industrial complex be spent on helping struggling people. But do you want to help struggling people? Like if so, can you give me some examples of like instances where you'd actually support that?
Yeah, say he's like 7,000 for migrants, which I don't know specifically what he's talking about. I wonder if it's like made up. Like I wonder if he said to the people there, like 7,000 per migrant. What do you think about that? And they were like, yeah, that sounds like I want. Yeah,
wow, that sounds like a lot, man.
Yeah, exactly. But all right, let's. He's not talking about it being, redirecting. But I mean, he also recently suggested he would consider RFK as a running mate. So I think that they're actually going along some similar lines here. Yeah,
that is a national. Yeah. You know what? I think that he should run as a third-party candidate with RFK Jr. as his running mate.
Yeah,
that is a national unity ticket that could get potentially thousands of votes.
Yeah, exactly.
Possibility.
I wish you were right. I don't think you are about that. Not that everything you said there was wrong. I mean, it's important stuff. I mean, it's funny, you're such a good talker and you're such a likable guy. I think you really could go far. I mean, I must say you're one of the few guys who I find both disarming and alarming.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. That is a
like
compliment.
No, I mean it. No, I mean, look, you're attractive looking, you're young. The country is, first of all, here's a big advantage you have.
The zucchini makes
Biden
more
and
sense.
Trump. People hate this matchup, and they
You don't
hate
want my
that
giant
there's two
zucchini? Why not?
geriatrics. So
Look
you're
how
like the
big it is.
most not that.
They're both over
you're
twice my age, literally. Yeah.
right, and you've got color in your face that's not either orange or ghostly.
But
these are all.
There are older people who can be sharp, and there are younger people who have lost their wits. But I think I would like to think, and I think so far we're having fun in this, bringing a young spirit to running the country. Even when I think about the cabinet, this is neither here nor there, but when I was running my companies, one of my philosophies was, even in the industries that I was in, right? So the first industry was biotech.
That was a little weird when he said you have color in your face. Maybe he might just be too drunk and high to realize what he said. I think he's also talking to the person that is least likely to outwardly get offended at that joke, because that would completely ruin. Imagine the jokes that this guy has to deal with on the campaign trail, and just grin and fucking bear it. It's probably. I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Ben.
I was going to say, oh my God, yes. Because if you have his rhetorical position, anything that's like, you could have people walking up like Chevy Chase's character in Community, be like, oh my God, I heard a great one about Indians. And like, I think to maintain his rhetorical position, he would have to at least politely smile and like not like admit to having a problem with it.
Yeah, which is fascinating, because also though, not to sound like some kind of expert on it, but the type of right-wing populist anti-woke politics that he's espousing is also present in India, right? And actually pretty prevalent in India right now. But it's a really interesting dynamic where, there he would be part of the majority, the majority that's oppressing. And here he's, he's in a minority group that's sort of holding water for the white majority, if it still is a majority.
Yeah, I mean, there is a substantial, I mean, I don't know. I remember on the subject of silly anecdotal evidence, but I remember when I was living in New Jersey in 2016, going to pick up food at an Indian restaurant I really liked in Edison. And there were all these flyers everywhere for Donald Trump coming to address the National Republican Hindu Coalition. So there is definitely a constituency for that politics there. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly like, honestly, Vivek is probably to the left of the BJP in India. I mean, they're very, very bad.
Yeah, and even, I mean, I remember I was reading a novel that kind of part of it was about the rise of Modi, and the main character was talking about how his father was, went from, growing up in basically in a very small village without, electricity or anything, to like posting like about libtards on Facebook and stuff like that. So I haven't. So I think
the most inspiring progression,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's even the cultural animus that he's present, is part of the far right. I mean, it's probably part of far right parties throughout the world, right? Like we're focusing.
Sure, yeah, but there is a sort of specific weird convergence in that case. Yeah. Back when she was a Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard's chumminess with Modi was like also one of the early signs that something was very, very odd was going on with her.
Yeah. This is way off point, but recently Ro Khanna visited India and he met with Modi, but he also met with some more left-wing people, and he's trying to say, "Hey, I talked to everyone," and it's pretty interesting. But I think
Ro Khanna's. Yeah. I mean, Ro Khanna is a little bit all over the place. Like, I think he's very good at some issues. But like, he also voted for like the congressional resolution condemning the horrors of socialism. Which is particularly funny because he was actually one of the national chairs of the Bernie Sanders campaign. So it's like, okay, the horrors of socialism didn't bother you that much then, like it always, like as much as, again, he does take, I think there have been some instances where I think Khanna has taken very good positions that are unusual. It's also there's also this disconcerting impression that he's always sort of, I don't know, he's always trying to very carefully calibrate a position to be a couple of different things at once.
Yeah, and that seems like that's exactly how he presented his whole trip. So anyway, we're getting into more interesting.
Yeah. Let's go back to Vivek.
The
median age in our company for the biotech industry was young in terms of people who work there.
Wait, on Wikipedia, it said at one point that his company had 8 employees, including his parents, and it was worth like hundreds of millions of dollars at that point.
Do we have any information about what his parents' jobs were?
His dad is a patent lawyer, I think, and also an engineer of some sort. I mean, the guy.
These aren't like no-show jobs. I'm gonna give my dad. Like
I think it might be, but anyway, let's. I assume he means after that point.
Sure. And for me, at least, and this is the way I would run the federal government. It might be different for other people in the way they built their companies, but for me, I tend to find that people whose peak in their career is still yet ahead of them. I'm not going to say young or old, because there could be people who are advanced in years whose peak is still ahead of them.
Yeah.
But somebody, whoever it is their peak is ahead of them. Versus somebody who actually has a great resume, but by definition, if you have a great resume, it means you've accomplished great things. By definition, if you've accomplished great things for many people, that means that chances are your peak might be behind you and you're obsessed with talking about that. Boy, do we accomplish a lot more with people whose peak.
Bill definitely does not fall into the camp of people whose peak is behind them. I'm sure he's still building. I mean, he just made this podcast. But
yeah, there you go. Right. I mean, this is surely Club Random is the high point of his career.
I think this also might be a weird way to differentiate himself from Trump while also complimenting Trump. Like, he has an amazing resume, but he's hit the peak already. I think he's like, because he has to be really nice to Trump. So I think it's kind of.
Yeah, I mean, Vivek has been one of the candidates who's been the least willing to pretend to be running against Trump. DeSanctimonious has actually done some criticism here and there. Like Vivek, I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty sure Vivek's highest real ambition would be to be Trump's running mate. So any trial balloon he might drop of a hint of a criticism about Trump is going to be very implied.
It's going to be implied, and then to your point, then he could say, "Hey, you need a little bit of youth on your." But let's see Trump pick a non-weight running mate. I'll believe it before I see it.
We'll see.
I'll believe it before I see it. I'll believe it after I see it.
There you go. Make more sense.
Yeah, I also smoking a little.
Is still ahead of them. So my campaign, fully staffed by young people. My campaign manager is younger than me. You talk about the way I've built my companies. So for the federal government, when I think about my cabinet,
have some older people.
A few, of course.
You know, every society.
But it will lean young. It will skew young.
You're from an ancient culture that seemed to understand, like most cultures in the world, the village elders.
Yes.
You know, Confucianism in China, most countries revere the elders for their wisdom. It's true. You have a great amount of energy at 38. You're super smart, but I do see something that alarms me, truly.
Fair enough.
Because you don't have the wisdom about certain issues. I don't think you think Trump lost the election.
Well, I think that big tech interfered. You and I have talked about this a year ago.
What the fuck does that matter?
I want to say
who got the most. Of course, big tech interfered. They interfered for Trump. That was all about Fox News being.
It's the largest illegal campaign contribution in human history.
Okay, but who actually got more votes?
Biden got. I mean, literally in terms of the number of votes that were counted.
And Biden won the states.
I have seen no evidence to suggest
there is none. That's why you haven't seen it. And so Biden won the Electoral College.
I want to come back.
Wait, just answer this. No, you can't come back. You can't play politician.
Well, I want to come back to it after we're done with this.
Did Biden win the amount of electoral votes that they said he won, and therefore is the legitimate president?
I think the reason he's
legitimate, not the right answer.
No, the reason the election was rigged was big tech. That's really the answer. Bill, and I'm data driven.
It doesn't matter. Big tech is always it does matter.
Here's what matters.
But we can't at the moment. It's happened.
I accept Biden's the duly elected president of the United States. I said it at the
Everybody
time, and I
does
said it
bad
now.
things during campaigns, including using big tech. What matters is then who got the most votes. We have to start with somewhere that's real. That's what's real. Who won those states that puts him in the White House? And you cannot just say to me, yes, Biden won the election. Because
yes, I said that at the time. I
so
said at the
Biden
time, and I said
won
it
the
ever
election.
since.
Because
Biden had the most votes in the election. Biden had the most
can't
votes.
say those words. It's like you're a husband who can't say.
No, Biden had, but the reason is, Bill. I mean, there's good data on this. We were systematically suppressed. The Hunter Biden bribery story, which is relevant today.
That's what
on the eve of an election where most people who are independent said, many people who are independent, enough to change the outcome of the election, said they would have changed their vote had they had access to that information. It's the greatest form of election interference in human history.
Were you unmuting your point? Unmuting yourself to make a point, or did I misinterpret the unmute there?
Yeah, I don't remember. I got distracted, but I'm going to defer to you on this because you come from an ancient culture.
Yeah. I mean, and this is like a fucking.
I just can't get past that line. You know, you come from an ancient culture.
It's like the slangiest compliment you could give.
It's like, I don't know. I mean, Bill is like what, like half Irish and half Jewish. Those are both old cultures. I don't understand.
I mean, Vivek was born in America, so it's I can't even. And then I guess I don't know.
I mean, it is like, okay, so that was amazing. Bill is not wrong here. Like, Vivek is being incredibly evasive about this question because he can't just say, yeah, Biden won and leave it at that. His base wouldn't like it. So he has to say something he has to signal really hard that like he's on their team on this question without actually committing himself to the claim that he can't defend. And I think in his own plotting kind of way, that is what Bill is picking up on and getting mad at him for.
Yeah, I know. I didn't mind this part from Bill so much. What do you think about the claim that this is like the biggest election rig of, I assume he means in the United States history. What do you make of that? What do you make of that claim?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty goofy, right? I mean, like, what about like Hayes Tilden and 18, like the Great Compromise, right? That ends Reconstruction. Like, that seems like a much more blatantly. I mean, even if everything you agree with his basic premise that like this is rigged in some sense, that seems like a much worse example. Or I don't know, 2000, right, when George W. Bush is essentially made president by the Supreme Court after. It's at least extremely questionable whether he actually won a majority in Florida, which he needed for his electoral college vote. And they were, still recounting, and, they went through all these shenanigans to stop the recount. That seems like a much more clearly rigged election. I mean, just saying, well, this information that was suppressed that would make people feel differently. I mean, one, on the Hunter Biden stuff, and don't get me wrong, I think that like some of the tech stuff to suppress the Hunter Biden story initially was really bad. Like, I think he's not wrong about that premise. That like Twitter stopping people from sharing it, like, I think that is legitimately very bad and very objectionable. But also that lasted for like a day. Right, like that they like after a day they were like, okay, fuck it, share the story as much as you want. So is my understanding. So certainly the like really extreme things they were doing to stop it, only lasted for like a day. And I kind of think most people knew about the Hunter Biden stuff. Whereas if you're going to count that as rigging the election, then I don't know. I mean, certainly Nixon, like sabotaging the peace talks in Vietnam, that LBJ was conducting, as part of his strategy to win the election. That seems way worse, and people actually did not know about that at all at the time. The Reagan, October surprise about the hostages. I mean, like, that seems way worse. Like, I mean, this idea that, like, big tech companies largely supporting Biden and making censorship decisions that that favored that. Whatever kind of criticism you want to make of that, like, even if you think that there's certainly more than no truth to that. But like, it just claiming that this even makes the top 5 of rigged elections because of that seems kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, and I mean, also, he's not. I mean, I'd be curious what data he's using to really say that would be causal for sure. That they definitely would have if the independents had known. I'm curious what polling data he's using, because that seems like that seems a little.
Again, I mean, like,
yeah.
the Hunter Biden stuff really does seem to have been quite widely known by the time the election happened, and I'm not even really convinced that it. Well, I mean, I guess this is what you just said, but I mean, I'm not really that convinced by the premise. I actually think a lot of the Hunter Biden stuff, in a weird way, it might have helped Biden, because it seemed like he was trying to be a good dad to his fuck up son, and it made him more sympathetic. Right. And also, the most important point is the one that's made by Secret Agent Dan in chat, which is on this tech suppressed us angle. Guess you shouldn't have relied on a private company to become your means of communication. Because, of course, unfortunately, I wish this were not how it worked. I want to nationalize these companies, but given that they are in private hands, then, yeah, legally, they have no particular obligation, not to do this stuff. I mean,
go ahead.
Like, it's just so, I mean, if it's rigging, it's not exactly illegal rigging. And say again, I would love to take that power out of the hands of these Silicon Valley CEOs, but I seriously doubt Vivek is down with that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's just they carved this snake-like weird path where he's like, I'm a billionaire, vote for me because I built up this private company, but also these tech he talks like a tech guy, but then these tech companies created the just because they're it's basically just because the tech companies are seen as liberal, right? So that's like a convenient scapegoat. So I feel like he carves out these weird charts out this weird course that kind of like it's the story that he's telling is kind of odd. And the last thing is that I'm glad you brought up Hayes Tilden, because I was going to take you to if you didn't bring up Hayes Tilden, I was going to take you to task, because that one's obvious.
Hey, Jake, do you know who I am? I know about politics stuff.
Yeah, because I definitely was about to bring up Hayes Tilden. That's why I referred to you.
But I mean, yes, that does seem like certainly the most consequential, but also the most blatantly stolen election in America.
Yeah. All right, let's see.
No,
that's actually the fact.
That would be Russia. If you're listening, please find Hillary's emails and then release them on WikiLeaks. That was the biggest breach. I mean, you can't really believe.
You're talking about James Comey and his statements before the 2016 election.
I'm talking about Trump. Trump said that. I don't need James Comey. Trump said, Russia, if you're listening. You don't remember that moment?
I mean,
you don't remember that?
I don't particularly remember that moment, but I'm talking about large technology companies in this last election.
Okay.
I just think if we don't learn from that, Bill, we're destined to make the same mistakes again. But here's what I'll say.
I don't
That's
believe
an example
you
of what you'll call lack of wisdom.
Okay,
and we can agree to disagree on that.
You're running as like, I'm not the bullshitter guy like the other guys. And then you just told me you don't remember when Trump said, Russia,
I actually don't, but
it was a giant moment that's been replayed a zillion times.
Back when I was in business and
you're, oh really? You were that tuned out from politics?
I mean, what Trump was saying on a given day in 2016.
Not a given day.
Really.
That was replayed a zillion times because he was impeached over this.
I think the impeachment, though, I can talk about. I mean, the impeachment was on a flawed basis. I mean, that's a hard reason. We now understand.
I don't know. I'd actually be curious to hear what you think, but I believe Vivek about this and don't particularly fault him, because it's like, look, Bill finds it incredible because he and his MSNBC brain liberal friends were obsessed with that like particular moment, but other people in other news bubbles, like, no, I don't believe that everybody in the world who's like super political necessarily remembers this exact thing. What do you think?
I'm not sure. I definitely I don't.
I do remember it, right? But I'm just
no.
saying,
I don't think I would have remembered it before. Again, but when he said it, it had the ring of truth. I was definitely like, oh, I kind of remember that. I do. He is being very slippery though. To like, so I kind of appreciate what Bill's doing here, but I
gotcha. Like, I don't think it's out of the question that Vivek is pretending not to remember that. Like, that would be consistent with what he's done earlier in this conversation. Like, because he has, as you said, been very slippery about some of this stuff. But I guess,
yeah.
I don't think it's as crazy as Bill is portraying it.
No, I agree with you. I think what's actually going on here is that I don't remember that is a really bad. It's actually a really bad rejoinder when someone says someone else did something bad, and you're like, I don't specifically remember that, because then you're just setting up the other person to be like, okay, well, that happened. What do you think about that? You know what I mean? So then like it's a way to get out. You know, I don't know. I guess
I agree that it's not implausible that he's pretending. I think that he might very well be pretending. I don't know. I guess I also just don't agree that this was like this super duper significant moment, because it's like, it's also, I mean, it's also kind of a joke, right? It's like this, you know, and also, frankly, the whole phenomenon of Trump 2016 is that, like, just because he said something that would be really shocking if any other candidate had said it in any other election doesn't necessarily mean that people remembered a week later. Like, by the time a week had passed, he'd say 10 other things that would have been crazy and shocking if like anybody else had said it.
Yeah, I didn't remember it specifically. What I actually was thinking is that even if he's telling the truth, just saying, oh, I don't remember that. It's more like you kind of have to go more with like even if he did say that kind of thing, I think I do think he's shrinking a little under Bill's incredibly potent line of questioning. All right, but we should probably let it play out.
But here's the problem right now. We are still spending, and this is why I'm in this race. We have spent literally 7 years now relitigating and rehashing that series of events that, whatever they are, is not going to change.
Well, yes,
and I think that's what's wrong in this election right now as well.
Well, that's the nature of justice. When people commit crimes, if they're not punished for it, then they tend to commit the crimes again. So the fact that we're still talking about it, yes, he's got.
I think these indictments are deeply politicized. I think they're a bad idea for the future of the country.
Well, let's just talk about the one that matters, the one where he tried to overthrow the United States government. You don't think that?
You're talking about the third one from Jack Smith.
I'm talking about the
Jack Smith indictment.
Absolutely.
So I believe that I would have made very different judgments than Trump made that day. But Trump expressing his view on the outcome of the election, even knowingly telling a lie, is not unconstitutional.
Great.
It's not a legal violation.
So
Alvarez, the case which 2012,
but he didn't
famously said politicians can have a First Amendment right to lie. And Jack Smith's indictment acknowledges that, which is the interesting part about this.
Okay. But this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about things like.
But yeah, it does acknowledge that. That is interesting. The specific way it's interesting is that it shows that you're portraying it inaccurately. Right? It's like Trump was not indicted for lying about the election, or even for filing nonsense lawsuits or any of that. Right? The indictment very clearly says you have a right to do all that stuff. He was indicted for doing things like trying to, pressure states to submit slates of fake electors and get people to like sign false affidavits saying that they were the real electors and that Trump won their states. Like, that's the stuff that's actually illegal. Like, the indictment only even mentions his statement to, like his statements to show intent. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that like those were considered to be independent crimes.
You mean I'm being indicted for having conversations? I'm being indicted for calling up my friends in Georgia? It's like
exactly.
It's like what you keep seeing on Twitter of these ridiculous over generalizations.
Yeah.
Putting up fake electors. That's not just words.
Okay.
They did that. A slate of fake electors. We're talking about a guy on tape saying, this is the one that came down the other day about Georgia, a guy on tape saying, I need you to find me 11,780 more votes. Now, that alone, if I just had that, wouldn't that be a case? I need you to find me, he's saying
and they didn't do it, right?
But that, I tried to rob a bank the other day and I didn't get the money.
What law? I mean, here's where I'm at. Not every bad judgment or every bad act is a crime.
Oh my God.
What law did that violate?
He's the president.
What law did that violate?
Probably the oath of office that he took when he would defend the United States.
That's not
what is
something
more
we
essential.
I mean, George Bush violated the oath of office.
What is more
when he sent troops to Iraq? This is why we vote people out. That's how elections work.
I know, but
so I think that's the fundamental difference in how we do things in the United States, where you're taking deeply held judgments that you disagree with. Great, go to the ballot box and vote. That's how we do things in the United States of America.
Which is exactly what he's on trial for. One of the counts is
what law did that break? So, I mean, if you look, I mean, Jesus, I mean, this is all very funny, right? Because it's like, I didn't like the years of MSNBC obsession with this shit. I didn't like Russiagate. I actually think these indictments now are pretty legit. What law did he break? Well, let's see. The Georgia indictment, which is what I think I'm talking about. 22 counts related to forgery or false documents and statements. 8 counts related to soliciting or impersonating public officers. 3 related to influencing witnesses. 3 related to election fraud or defrauding the state. 3 related to computer tampering, 1 kind of related to racketeering, 1 related to perjury, right? Those will be the laws.
Yeah. And I have to say, Bill's not doing, I mean.
No, Bill's doing a terrible job because Bill has no idea what's in the indictments.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, probably violated the oath. That's a law, right?
Yeah.
Like the earlier one, the one just before the Georgia one, we did a whole breakdown where we watched Crystal and Kyle arguing with Michael Tracy about this, and there, I mean, a lot of it is this Reconstruction era. Like, part of it is fraud, like that's a crime, and part of it is conspiracy against rights, which is a Reconstruction era law that basically says that, you know, if you're conspiring to deny people a fair election, that's against the law. And again, the thing that's considered to be conspiring is not the giving speeches at rallies falsely claiming to have won. It's not the lawsuits. It's the fake elector schemes, etc. Like all the, all of, like, again, like this stuff. You know, this stuff is against the law, and it seems like it pretty straightforwardly he did all of it. And people are probably sick of hearing me say this, so I'll just say it very quickly and move on. Like, I think it's a good thing for ex-presidents to get busted when they break the law. I think the objectionable thing is the other way around. When, like, the objectionable thing is that so many of them have gotten away with worse crimes, but the solution is to prosecute them. The solution isn't to let, Donald Trump get away with, like, just trying to overturn a Democratic election or two.
Yeah, well, what does Vivek mean when he says that George Bush violated the oath of office when he invaded Iraq? That's interesting.
Yeah, well, it's also like, okay, if there had been, like, I don't know, I mean, if say during the Obama years the Justice Department had indicted George W. Bush, I mean, again, violating the oath of office, I do not believe is an actual law, but whatever.
Yeah.
Like, but if they'd, like, found some legal theory to indict George W. Bush for invading Iraq during the Obama years, do you really think Vivek would have been in favor of that?
Yeah, exactly. But I have to say, as bad as Bill's doing, I actually think Bill is getting the better of this exchange. I had to rate. You agree? Yeah, because
I think it's
cheating people out of their vote.
The question is, what's best for the country at this point in time?
Well,
and I do not think that in the middle of an election.
Well, the first thing we can decide. I agree with you that
look at the timing of this indictment.
I agree with you that it may prove. We may look back on this and say, because the indictments only make Trump stronger. He's like a rapper. You know, the more times he gets arrested, the more street cred he has. And I think, you know, the idea that Republicans don't like him because they love that the porn stars, they love that he was fucking porn. They love to be fucking porn stars, Republicans, gay porn stars, but still.
I think, Bill, to really understand what's going on in the country, we have, first of all, right now, on one hand, the son of a U.S. president
style, I know,
collecting multi-million-dollar bribes from foreign countries that president is now arguably making good on in different ways.
Oh, gosh.
And on the other hand, we have
yes, I mean, that's true.
Sitting a former president of the United States that currently, by the way, it would be a lot easier for me if Trump were eliminated, by the way. And some of the recent polls this week, I'm in second. Polling averages, right. I'm in third. It would be a lot easier for me if Trump were out of the way. I don't want to win this election by seeing a political opponent eliminated by the federal police state. I think that is a disastrous precedent
unless he committed crimes that police should be apprehending him for.
So let's get, if you want to get into the details on this, let's get into the details. Let's talk about the Espionage Act, which he's being charged under. That is the most un-American law in our history.
Not in this.
It's been used to lock up anti-war activists.
Okay, I'm not sure that is what he's being tried under.
For the second indictment, it is the Espionage Act that he's charged under for the documents case. Taking the documents.
The documents. Okay, you switched the cards there.
With so many indictments. There's 4 of them at the exact same time. What's going on? It's not about the crime.
If it was up to me,
eliminating the man.
I wish they hadn't brought the Stormy Daniels one. I wish they hadn't even brought the. I mean, he's guilty of all these things, of course.
Okay, Stormy Daniels one, because I just brought it up, is actually a pretty sketchy legal theory. That like that one is like certainly the one it seems most likely that be most surprising if he actually went down on, because it's whereas he did definitely make the hush payments. I think nobody's breaking much of a sweat trying to deny that. It's the actual law they're charging him under, because the law he clearly broke, the statute of limitations would have passed for, and so the law they're charging him under, it's a little questionable whether the Manhattan DA actually has the jurisdiction, and also it's sort of based on seeing hush money payments as a kind of indirect campaign contribution. Fair enough. That one's like a little whatever. Also, calling balls and strikes here. I agree with Vivek. The Espionage Act is terrible and should definitely be overturned. And, he's absolutely right about that. But as long as you've got it, this is like, that one seems like really actually, if anything, maybe the most open and shut case, because Trump is on tape saying all this stuff. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's really interesting. I'm breaking the law here. I'm doing crimes. These are. I don't have the legal right to have these documents, but I won't give them back. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's also interesting how some of these right-wing guys are now willing to kind of pick up on us, either I would say left-wing, but maybe more of a libertarian talking point and he started out as a libertarian, so that's where he probably gets some of this stuff. But things that the left would agree with libertarians on, right? They pick it up for very specific things. For this, it's like the whataboutism it's also kind of like if I don't know, to me it's like someone commits a crime and goes to murder or goes to jail for murder, and we're like, but that historically, how many Black people are locked up in this country because of overcrowding of prisons, and you're just like, I agree with all that, but that doesn't mean that the guy did it. This one specific person doesn't commit murder. You know what I mean? It's like he's really redirecting it to being like, oh, the history of this act is used for bad stuff, but that doesn't really apply to whether Trump did what he did. I did not know that this was going to go so fucking deep into the indictment. I'm probably, this is bad of me, but I'm just like, just let me know how it ends, because I feel like he was impeached. I barely even remember that the man was impeached, because it didn't fucking matter at all, right? And then so it's kind of like, and MSNBC is always like, we got him. So I'm just like, if he goes to jail, let me know.
I get that. It is actually kind of interesting to me, because this time last year, I would have made fun of you if you'd suggested that he was going to get arrested. It's like, no way in hell, right? We don't do that. presidents never get busted for anything. And so the fact that it's even gone this far is like genuinely kind of shocking and interesting. The other point I just wanted to make is that Vivek's defense here is that, well, clearly all these must be spurious because he's been indicted for a bunch of different crimes at once. Which is like, okay, I mean, we could apply this to like John Gotti finally being busted. It's like, oh, look at how many things they're charging him with. Like, clearly, you know, they're just they don't really care about the law. Like, you know, clearly they're just trying to do something like, you know, because really, like, if everything was going properly, you definitely only indict somebody for one thing at once.
Yeah, I would. I guess I would. You know, the counterfactual would be interesting. Like, what if he really did do all these things? Let's say, then what would you suggest that? You know what I mean? Like, if he did commit 4 crimes at once, do we just not try him, or what? You know what I mean? That's kind of because they're basically he's just saying it's bad for the country. It's bad for the country. So it's like, okay, I don't know. It's
yeah.
Counterfactual should reveal like, all right, but like I'm under the
I
assumption.
would like to hear him just very clearly and explicitly say, yes, I would agree that if he has committed crimes, he should be indicted for them.
Yes. But he did. Yeah, he's trying to kind of have his cake, his Vivek cake, and eat it too. All right, we should probably let a bit of this play.
Yeah, I wouldn't have brought the documents.
He's not guilty of anything in the Stormy Daniels ones. You want to know why? You're a smart guy. Let me just explain this.
I don't care about that
Bill,
one. I never cared
I know you don't care about that
one,
but it relates to the ones that followed because it's evidence that there's something else going on here. So you will agree with me on this one, okay? You say he's guilty of it. Well, let me just test you on this for a second, see how you feel. They said that the crime there was that he should have used campaign funds to pay hush money to the porn star. You know what? If he had used campaign funds to pay hush money, that actually would have been more of a crime than not doing it. Right?
I did a whole thing on this.
Okay, so I missed that.
I'm pre with
You're pre with me on it, so I don't need to preach to the choir on it.
Right, no, exactly.
But the point is, if there's 4 of these separate things coming right at the same time, smack dab in the middle of an election.
Because it happened. It's like they made it up.
But Bill, I just told you they made this one up. They literally made this one up.
They certainly did not make up, excuse me, they certainly did not make up the idea that he tried every single possible way to steal that election. He tried it.
I was talking about the first one. They made that was literally made up indictment.
Well, I'm talking about the one that's important and you know what's important. He tried it through pressuring Mike Pence, who was doing something in a very ceremonial role to pretend that he could change the vote. The fake electors. He pressured the secretaries of state and the legislatures. They talked about bringing out the military. They talked about seizing voting machines. This country has done one thing that was more amazing than any other. They've done many amazing things, but to me, the jewel in our crown, the peaceful transference of power. So many countries cannot get this right.
Yes.
We were one of the few who could get it right. And one guy, your boyfriend, Donald Trump.
Oh, come on.
Broke this and
don't give me the boyfriend
exactly
stuff. Come on. I'm running against him in this race, okay?
I think you're running to be his vice president.
Well, I'm glad you smoked that view out. I've already said, and I'll say it again, I'm not going to work for any administration.
So you would say no to it?
Yeah, I would say no.
You would say no to the vice presidency if Donald Trump offered it to you?
I don't do well in a number 2 role. I just don't.
To start, you're 38.
I don't do well I haven't been a number 2 role in a long time. I think there's a lot of ways to change this country.
Wow.
And each person has to look in the mirror and ask themselves, how do you have the maximal impact you can? So I do it through the private sector. I written 3 books in the last 2 years. I started businesses.
That's what I would only go right to the top, or
well, to me, it's not a hierarchy. It's not about a top.
Well, it is.
Where am I going to have the most impact?
You will literally not be the second most powerful person in the world.
If power were my currency and probability adjusting my power calculus, yeah, of course you would take it. But if the question is actually, how am I using my God-given talents to have a maximal positive impact on a country that has given me so much, being in that vice president role wouldn't be it.
Friday, September 1st, I'll be at the ACL Live at the Moody Theater in Austin, Texas. Saturday, September 2nd at the Texas Trust CU Theater in Grand Prairie. That's between Dallas and Fort Worth. I looked on the map. And Friday, September 15th and Saturday, the 16th at the David Copperfield Theater at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas.
I actually think Vivek, I know Bill wasn't great on this, but if Bill's good on anything, it's knowing stuff.
No, I think this is definitely the part of it where Bill has been best.
Yeah.
Has been, and I agree with you. I think I think Vivek came out looking better from everything, everything up until they started talking about Russiagate, at which point I just don't care very much. But like, I don't know. I guess that was like about even. And then when they got into the indictments, I think Bill definitely came up on top of that one because, like, I think he actually did. I mean, he did it all in very Bill Maher-ish ways, but he did actually make a lot of the points that would be most important to make about that. And Vivek was very evasive. And this, if somebody is charged with a bunch of different crimes, they must be innocent of all of them. Defense really is not very convincing.
Yeah, I think also Vivek is just in a weird situation where he kind of has to try to sound reasonable. So I think that like the only way you can really fight back on this stuff is just like go full fash, right? And just be like the government is going, the FBI is trying to, it's a witch hunt. Like, Trump is good at this kind of thing, right? For a reason, or maybe bad in the sense he's indicted, right? But you kind of have to give him a more poetic answer. And he's trying to like prosecute. He has a debate background in college, I think. So I think he's really trying to go point for point on something that is really weak on, you know what I mean? But there's tons of people who think the election was stolen, and I don't think that they were all appealed to with like this kind of like detail-oriented, tedious discussion, right? I think you have to go for something more soaring, and I think that Vivek is he appeals to people who don't quite want that, right? They want something that feels more grounded and more intelligent. But there is no intelligent defense of what Trump did. So I think that's where he comes across worse. Not to say that everything. I mean, it's very similar to like Ben Shapiro intelligence theater. He sounds well spoken, or he can speak articulately like Ben Shapiro. And sometimes what he's saying is incredibly stupid, but it still is this like smart guy theater, you know what I mean? But I think it's kind of a bad match to try to defend Trump.
No, I think that's totally right. And he's trying to thread again a very strange needle. I actually wonder. I would be really curious if you're a hardcore like Newsmax viewer, kind of voter is satisfied with what Vivek is saying here. Kind of along the lines of what you're saying, because it's like, or if they're picking up that he's not actually willing to commit to literally more people tried to vote for Trump than Biden, which presumably is what they want to hear.
Yeah, he's like, just even saying he got more votes. I don't know.
Because he is, again, on the election part, he really wanted to again signal that he. He wanted to signal that he's on the team of people who think the election is stolen without committing himself to things that he knows he can't defend. And then on the indictments too, it's like he's kind of running through all the talking points, but it's very I agree with you entirely. I think he's just trying to make a line work that he's just not going to be able to make sound reasonable. And also, I just fact check, he would absolutely take the VP offer. And maybe occasionally people would like throw these clips in his faces, but also ultimately nobody would care.
Yeah, I think he would take transportation like fucking
Yeah, he would literally take the Buttigieg movie prize. So
yeah. By the way, if any of you guys actually watch the Heidegger parody, he does the Torah read so well, where he's like, clearly drunkenly trying to read this on like a small screen somewhere. Yeah, where he's like, I'm gonna be in Las Vegas, 15th, 16th. I mean, MGM, and it's sometimes he's doing these like smaller theaters, and you can almost hear in his voice like, really, I'm going there. This is where they booked me. But
yeah. Speaking of which, it's not going to be at the MGM Grand, but tomorrow we should be able to announce the details for the Labor Day event in Chicago.
It's exciting. I hope some of those South Side guys from Vivek's rally go, and you could.
I hope the Ramaswamy army from the South Side cause trouble.
Yeah. All right, let's see.
Do you like true crime? Check out the new season of Hot and Deadly, a true crime podcast from ID.
He doesn't have
murder and betrayal. These episodes feature direct audio from ID's all-American true crime shows. Swamp Murders, Highway to Hell, and Southern Fried Homicide. You'll hear from investigators and family members close to these cases and learn about some shocking stories, like how a bank president was found at the bottom of a swamp and what happened when a former prom teen went missing. You can also listen to all of Season 1 now. It's a lot of true crime and all available to listen to today. Listen to Hot and Deadly wherever you get your podcasts. I mean, that's the part I love about you. You know, it's like I agree, and I find it just heartening when I see somebody who, like, I mean, your parents weren't even born in this country, right?
No.
I mean, this is,
I mean, no money.
Obama, I'll say something, you'll probably agree with this. Obama, when he ran, like, and when he was in office, sounded more like your rival from South Carolina, Tim Scott.
Yeah, he did a little bit, actually.
Well, I mean, it was more
aspirational.
Aspirational, yes. And like not discounting racism, but not making it the number one thing, and like everything is about that.
Yes.
That was Obama, and that seems like Tim Scott today.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of similarities in that sense between the two of them. Absolutely. Aspirational for the country. My view is the American dream is here's where I'm a little different than Tim Scott.
His big line was, my story is not possible in any other country. Obama used to say that.
That was
remember that one?
I do remember that one.
Okay, that
and
one,
it stuck with me.
All right. So, I mean.
And I think there's a deep truth to that. He doesn't say that anymore, interestingly.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
When people say, Bill, you've gotten more conservative, I'm saying, no, they changed, not me. I love that.
You're allowed to change too. You're a human being.
I am, and I do. I always change with new information. And sometimes I have changed. But basically, I've just been working on a book of all our old editorials. So I read every one going back to 2003. And it was a great way to like discover, like, archaeology-wise myself. I'm like,
I love that.
Actually. And I loved it too. And you know, the first 10, 15 years of real time, it was much more one-sided, making fun of the Republicans because the left gave me nothing. Obama was a disaster for comedians. He was perfect in every possible way. I mean, there was nothing you could. And
you're not basically that different, but I see where you're coming from.
Well, it drove the Republicans nuts
from a left-wing perspective.
His personal life. The fact that no corruption and they were looking for it. The fact that Obamacare was like paid for, things Republicans used to care about, paying for things. Their big program is now it's just anybody writes a check for anything, both sides. The Republicans are just the hypocrites because they pretend that they're the fiscally
the way I look at it,
responsible.
That's why I don't talk about Republicans and Democrats. Like I said, I think they're far more on the same party than they are not. But if you two-party systems, you got to use ballot access to get on a ballot.
And that's your team. You can't alienate them. You're going to have to. I know you only want to be number one.
I want to unite the entire country. I want to unite the entire country. And I think there's two
you
theories.
Can't.
Well, Bill, I'm hopeful that we can. I think but I
I'll
share
give you that one, bro.
Yeah, but here's what I would say is like 20 years from now, I don't think we can. I think we're in a window where we have a shot at getting this done, on actually not celebrating our diversity, but actually finding a common thread that all of us still share as Americans. I think it exists.
Can I give you some campaign advice?
Yeah.
You're such a personable guy. You're so smart, and the energy is amazing. But unless you soften on Trump, at least half the country that knows that he's an obnoxious criminal, they're never going to accept you as the guy who can unite us. I can't accept you as that.
Take like a Chris Christie figure who's in this.
I'm somebody who is like,
it's in a different place. I'm not motivated by vengeance and grievance.
Do you know how much shit I get from the left? A lot.
I know you do.
Yes,
I know you do.
Because
that's why I'm here. And I respect you.
Thank you.
Because you can actually speak to, in some ways, your own tribe.
It's like my thing is, if you expect me to get on the crazy train with you, and if I don't, then I lose my liberal card. Fuck you. You're changing what liberalism, not me. So, I'm a guy who could be your like biggest supporter kind of guy, right? Because I understand your critiques of the left, and a lot of them are valid, not all of them. But that is a albatross around your neck. The inability to call Trump, and just the most fundamental thing about America, once again, not to beat a dead horse, but the peaceful transference of power. One guy said, finally, no, I'm just not going to say it. There is no possible scenario. You should read the transcript of what he was saying to the person in Raffensperger in Georgia, the one he's just on trial for now. Now we know about the I need you to find 11,000 votes line. The one that I found so chilling at the beginning, he says right away, he said, if you saw the lines, I just saw the lines of the people waiting to see me, and there's no possible way I could have lost Georgia. This is a guy who thinks he couldn't lose the state because the lines at his event. This is like me saying, I'm going to be at the MGM Grand September 16th and 17th. That's true. And like I could go outside after the show, and I saw the lines to see my show, and there's no way I'm not the biggest act in Las Vegas.
Bill, can I just make an observation?
Crazy.
Can I make an observation?
Stupid and crazy.
I got to make an observation here.
You got to decouple.
Well,
from Donald Trump. That's the path.
I am running as my own man in this race to lead us to something. And here's the thing, and this is not specific to Trump, but everyone in this race running is included in this when I say this. The Republican Party for a long time has been a party that has been running from something. Okay, here are all the evil things, and we're running from them. I think I am the only person in this race who is actually trying to lead us to something. To an actual vision of what it means to be an American. You are a thoughtful man. Okay, I am here because you are not shackled by some party's orthodoxy.
Plainly.
Or and anything. And I'm glad that we've done it twice over the last few years, and you've read some of my books, and I've read a lot of your work, and there's so much that we could be delving into. This question of, is there a role for the village elder or not? Interesting. Is there a common thread that unites this country or not? I mean, I think that's the most important question of our time. There's room for debate on it. You could just say we're a bunch of two-legged higher mammals with different shades of melanin walk in this geographic space and do what our iPhones tell us to do on a given day. Is that the country, or is there some set of still remaining ideals that bind us together? That is the conversation that I think we need to have in this country. And yet I'm worried the same thing is going to happen next week on the Republican debate stage that's happening right here, is we are suffering a form of derangement about the recent past that at some point we are all going to have to say we lay down arms and ask ourselves, do we actually want to move forward, or do we actually just want a national divorce?
Yeah. And
do you want the divorce and just be done with it and go home and call it a ball game?
That sounds more like Obama. That was Obama. Let's move forward. Yes.
I don't want to sort of take, and I deeply disagree with Obama and many things, but I know you mean that in a good way, but let us move forward as one nation. And that's the challenge. We live in a more challenging time than we did even in 2008.
That was
forward,
a whole lot
not
of
backward, upward, not downward, and always twirling toward freedom.
Yeah, that was a whole lot of nothing. He's like, look, we're talking about this bogus stuff about like whether the last president literally tried to upend democracy, and instead we should be talking about our is there a place for old people, and should we go forward, not backward? Should we those are the really fascinating questions.
No, this was the really inspiring part when Bill got everything off his chest about the only thing that he can bring himself to care about besides wokeness, which is Donald Trump. And then they finished that up, and Vivek said some incredibly vapid, generic shit. And Bill got inspired because it reminded him of the vapid shit that Obama said long ago.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really telling thing where he's like, I could be your biggest fan. They on paper, they would have very few policy agreements. So what is he like? I guess it's the. I mean, I guess Bill probably agrees about getting rid of like, DEI programs and corporations. Maybe that's the only thing they would on paper agree on. But it's just that it's the rhetoric. He fucking loves the rhetoric. And there's only so much a presidential candidate can do about like this cultural issue, right? Of like, should we focus too much on race? You know what I mean? It's like
Well, I'm pretty sure if there was I'm pretty sure if there was something the president could do by decree to eliminate all corporate DEI trainings, that Donald Trump would have done it.
Exactly.
And by the way, that would have been what I would regard as the least objectionable thing that Donald Trump had ever done. I basically don't think that anybody should be forced to go to anything at work that's not like, sort of immediate, like a,
right.
I mean, like, I guess if there's like a safety issue, maybe you could have a mandatory training, but it's like, I've almost never been in a training on anything in my life, whether related to that or not, that I didn't think was a huge waste of time. So, like I'm willing to find some common ground with them there. If they'll, if we want to do some big compact where we nationalize the healthcare, industry, but also get rid of, workplace trainings, I'm down.
I think that there's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these programs aren't, very effective at what they're trying to accomplish. But I think that, they're taking these things that annoy a lot of people, right, and not really talking about that are really not even very addressable, right, on a political level.
There's very little you're likely to do about it, and also just objectively, it's like the 200th most important thing going on.
Yeah, it's not that important. It's just annoying, and it also, it's a really good dog whistle for a certain person, for a certain segment of the population that realistically is, annoyed by corporate wokeness because it's actually fucking annoying, and there's a certain percentage that's annoyed with it because they don't like any talk of racial equality, right? Because they would prefer us not to have. So it's a really nice talking point. I was thinking earlier that Vivek was like, when he was getting grilled on Trump, I could see him being like, but how about that Christopher Columbus though? We could agree on that, right? Like they're on solid ground waxing, which is technically maybe not for his time, but Christopher Columbus arguably did a lot of worse things than
No, it's I will absolutely say that. I think the fake electors scheme was bad. Slavery and genocide are worse.
Yeah. All right, let's keep it going, I guess.
And so let me just ask you: do you believe, Bill, that there is, like, that there exists? I have friends who would give me the answer to this question. The answer they would give is no, and that we need to get a national divorce and move on with it. I have friends both on the right and the left who say this, which is saddening to me.
This talk has to stop.
It is saddening to me.
Right. No,
deeply saddening.
We agree on that.
And so then what is that common thread that unites us? What is it? We think it exists. Let's talk about it. Meritocracy, the thing that my parents came here to pursue.
But that doesn't unite us anymore.
I think it unites most people. But if you're viewing this country through the prism of a TV screen or social media algorithm,
but the people
then
who
it
watch,
looks like we don't.
The people who watch MSNBC,
which aren't very many, which is a good thing.
Okay,
actually.
But they vote and they.
But this is an important point. That's my whole point. Is it's a small sliver of the population that creates the image of an artificial division that I think is mostly artificial.
But
I really do.
But we have to admit this is what you're always railing against. Yeah. That is a powerful faction in this country.
And I'm kind of done railing against it.
And you can't.
I'm in a different phase than when we first met.
Okay.
Because we had to see the problem and we did.
Okay.
Now, what are we running to?
Okay.
That's where I'm at.
Those folks, you're assuming, I'm making a point of this because I think it's important. You're assuming that this is going to unite us. Meritocracy. Yes, there was a time when everyone believed in meritocracy as the most important thing. But now the other side, those people watching that network believe in something called equity. I'm sure it's in your book. Mm-hmm. And there are definitions of equity, which of course you would understand. Yes, absolutely. We should strive for that. And then there is a form of equity.
Yes.
That rubs right up against meritocracy. I mean, this is colleges getting rid of
affirmative action?
Well, no, exams.
Oh, exams. Oh, you're saying the other direction. Yeah.
Yes, I'm saying it's not about merit.
So-
we don't care what your score is.
So I think you're smoking out a good point. Group outcome equality, group outcome equity, and meritocracy are fundamentally incompatible.
They are at odds.
They're
yes.
I would say if you take both of them seriously to their natural limit, they're incompatible.
Well, that doesn't mean
other.
you can't have a mixture of two things, maybe not 50-50, but I mean, there do needs to be redress.
But the point I was going to make for you is, from my perspective, is most people share one vision of that in this country. Enough people share. I think it's 50-50. I think it's easily 80-20 in the direction of people who believe in actual free speech, believe in meritocracy, believe in self-governance, right? The idea that at least Congress should make the laws and not three-letter agencies in Washington, D.C. I think most people believe that that's a good thing. That's what our founding fathers believed. I think, we may disagree on what the laws that Congress should make, but we agree that Congress should be the one making them.
When you put it vaguely like that, a poll of people would say, yes, we agree with
like
that.
An overwhelming majority.
But then when you got to the specifics of threatening agencies.
Shutting down an FBI.
Or something like that.
So
and
actually,
and you know what? I'll give you that one. Not that I think we should necessarily do it.
I'm keeping 15,000 of the 35,000.
Your FBI idea is not as crazy as I thought. Okay. That's a win.
Can I give you the Department of Education
and
for you too?
Also, the fact about 20,000 of them work in that one building in DC, I didn't know that. See, when I get new information, I do. I process it, and I might change my mind. I don't think I'm all the way to let's get rid of the FBI.
I don't think that's actually correct.
Well, I would say
but a streamlining certainly seems in order.
Let me just, if I said let's reorganize the FBI to put generalist agents into specialized functions in other bureaus in the federal government.
Right.
Okay. I think you would.
This is like the classic, like, abolish the police, or like, what do you mean by abolish the police? Of well, we're gonna have a group of people that when a crime is committed, they interfere, but totally different than
yeah. They'll probably like wear blue uniforms, but yeah, we're gonna call it the Department of Public Safety, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly.
Respond well to that. Right. That's effectively what my proposal is.
So do you talk about something like that in Iowa?
I talk about it in New Hampshire. I was at St. Anselm College. First time this ever happened. The prosecutor will unveil like a giant poster board. You've seen these things. So what we did is we took giant poster boards explaining, like literally boxes, moving them around for the FBI, the Department of Education, and then the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is one that I did as well. I mean, this is an agency whose culture is fundamentally hostile to the existence of nuclear energy in the United States of America. It used to be 3 to 4 years to build a new nuclear power plant in the United States. You know what it is now? 25 to 40 years.
I talk about this all the time.
You do? Okay.
Well, about like the fact that nothing gets done in this country because these just obscene levels of graft, and bureaucracy, red tape. We can't build home housing for the homeless.
That's totally right, though, because bureaucracy stops new housing construction. It is the chokehold in our country. So the premise of I have two premises.
If you could get through
I'm
that.
the anti-bureaucracy candidate. 70, but you can't be scared when I say things like, I want to fire 75% of the federal employee headcount. I just do. Most organizations.
I mean,
think of your organization.
Government.
90% of the people, 25% of the people do 90% of the work.
No, my operation is lean.
Okay, fine. It's not the federal
They're
government.
all good.
In the federal government, 25% of the people do 90% of the work.
Because the federal government, of course, does not have to answer to anybody.
And there's no meritocracy.
Right.
Because they have these civil service
there is at certain levels.
Minimal.
And look, there is a lot. I don't know. This number.
And so if you're anti-bureaucracy with me, join me in not being scared when I say the things that we need to do to fix it.
No, what I'll say is this. The figure you come up with, 75%, is what I would call rectum derived. In other words, you pulled it out of your ass. So I don't know where we're getting that number, but I will say this. The federal government, the deep state that you're also paranoid about.
The deep state exists. It's the bureaucracy.
Of course it does.
It is the bureaucracy.
Right. And most of it is people processing forms and issuing passports and doing things that make the lives of citizens feel like they're living not in a third world country.
And this is how a nation ends, not with a bang, but with a
really?
whimper.
This is how a nation ends, with having my passport processed?
So here's my litmus test.
Yeah, that's how a nation.
George Washington, I think so. George Washington,
you would agree
Alexander Hamilton walk in the streets of this country today, would they be proud or appalled of that bureaucracy? I think they would be appalled because they never imagined
I agree.
that existed.
The
Right?
Department of Homeland Security is a
It's a
monstrosity.
disaster.
Right.
Total
I
disaster.
know. But there is also
The
a need
CDC
for an
is a disaster. The
Oh,
FDA
we're all
is
on-
a disaster.
Absolutely.
Right,
The
so-
what when?
The FDA.
The FDA.
The FDA is the FDA
Totally.
is a
Yes.
colossal disaster.
Of course.
And I've dealt with the FDA. I've gotten 5 medicines approved
Yes.
that I've worked on that are now approved.
Right.
I
You
can
know
speak
that one from
first
the
personally.
inside, right?
We could have developed those at a tiny fraction of the cost. And you know what? Who likes the FDA?
And you didn't because of
Because
government?
the FDA.
The
100%.
FDA.
Because of the frickin' drug administration. And the answer is that Big Pharma wants to keep it that way because that's stock.
So this business that he had buying up pharmaceutical patents, so he could sell drugs that they had absolutely nothing to do with developing. It's like whatever the limitations that were, that's the FDA's fault.
Well, I think he might have actually. I think they were drugs that like other companies failed to develop, and then he tried to do it. He was trying to revolutionize drug development. So the FDA approved 6 drugs developed at Vance, which I don't know, and launched by Roivant. Blah blah blah. So his strategy was to purchase patents from larger pharmaceutical companies for drugs that had not yet been successfully developed, and then bring them into the market. In 2023, he called himself a scientist and said, "I developed a number of medicines," which is not accurate. But yeah, and one of them, the thing that happened was one of them that they were developing ended up not working, and that was when like the stock when it briefly crashed. But anyway, just to be fair.
Okay, all right. So that's not quite as bad as I was thinking from what you said earlier, but it is also probably still not the case that too much bureaucracy was the only thing that was standing in between his company and being a powerhouse of medical innovation.
Yeah. So his Interpredine was an attempt to market. It was a drug for Alzheimer's disease. But then in 2017, the company announced that Interpredine had failed in its large clinical trial. The company's value plunged. It lost 75% in one day and continued to decline afterward. Shareholders who lost money included various institutional investors, such as the California State Teachers Retirement System Pension Fund. Ramaswamy was insulated from much of the losses because he held his stake through Roivant, through his own company. I don't think it was the FDA's fault that the drug trial didn't work. It basically, I think it was like one of those inflated, those companies inflated by Wall Street. You know what I mean? It was like speculations, like speculative money, and then it didn't end up actually delivering on what it said it would deliver. Because it
is also worth pointing out that if we're talking about pharmaceutical innovation and the role of the state, that the main reason, honestly, I know this was very different from a lot of people's impressions, but like the main reason why so many new drugs come in the United States is that the National Institute of Health pours so much money into funding labs that develop them. I mean, there's I think more than 3/4, even according to the lowest estimate I saw. This is in Mariana Mazzucato's book, The Entrepreneurial State, of genuinely new drugs. Because I think most drugs that are brought to market are at best sort of slight tweaks to ones that already exist, or even, Me Too drugs where you're basically just you're basically just making some completely superficial change purely so you can patent the result. It's like filing off the serial numbers and slapping your own brand on it, essentially. But most genuinely new ones, NMEs, new molecular entities, are come from NIH funded labs. So I mean, the idea that really the innovation is coming in pharmaceuticals is coming from the private sector, and big government is standing in the way of that, I think really distorts much more than not.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to pause it there, but we can keep going.
stops new upstarts from bringing competition to market. And so this is the private public sector. It's not a Republican problem or a Democrat problem. It's crony capitalism in the guise of bureaucracy.
But how the heck
using it to stifle competition in the market?
I couldn't agree more. But I mean, all the people with their snouts at the trough, the reason why nothing gets done, we tried to build high-speed rail here in California. I mean,
lobbying. Disaster.
It was 7 times the cost of what it would cost to build it in France, which is not exactly unknown
to high cost
to
unions,
labor,
yes,
right, issues. And so
France
finally they just
making us look bad. Even nuclear power plants, same thing. They just give up.
You know
nuclear
what?
power plants in France, 5 to 8
because
years, 20 years.
The money went to consultants.
Yeah.
Everybody needs so many consultants. Like nobody could even fucking know how to do their own job. They have to have somebody consult.
This is it. You're not on the same side of this,
we're
brother.
definitely on that.
But this
so
is the
much
heart of my camp. So when you say deep state, don't say it so like condescendingly.
Well,
understand that this is actually the essence of the real threat to liberty as it plays itself
But
out.
let's say you're
economy,
So let's say you're 75%, which is a pie in the sky wish that'll never come true anyway. So
it's going to come true. I'll tell you.
Not to that number. Let's say maybe you're off by maybe your numbers in your head are just off by a little bit. So let's say we get to 50%. Like we don't need half the government. That could be true. That absolutely could be true.
And I've said half by the first year. And so if we discover that's good enough, then great. But here's where I'm at, is that the U.S. president is elected to run the executive branch of the government. And what we have today is a system where the person who we elect to run the executive branch of the government doesn't actually run the executive branch of the government.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, it's just the truth.
How do you know?
I mean, look at what they try to do. I mean, Trump says, I want to fire people. What did they tell him? You can't fire them because there's civil service protections. The law says
I
you
thought
can't
we were
fire
talking
someone.
about Biden.
Well, I'm saying in the last 50 years in this country, the people who we elect to run the government don't actually run the government. That's just a fact. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Jay.
So
if they walk around Washington, D.C. today, they say these are puppets.
Well, who was running the government?
A bureaucratic machine. The laws aren't made even in the halls of Congress. The person executing the law is not the person sitting in the White House. It is a managerial machine.
Okay,
and these are good. I'm not conspiratorial about the evil intentions. These are good people as level of individuals. But the machine
you have a good
is really what's crushing the will of the people.
This is where I think we need a few more years on you. You have a good point, but then you just so overstate it.
I'm not overstating it, Bill.
Say it again.
So the people who we elect to run the government, they're not the ones who actually run the government.
That's such an overstatement.
The laws are not made in Congress.
They're made
by
Congress.
the
They're affected by the bureaucratic
That's what it's supposed
state.
to be. That's what it's supposed to be.
Oh, come on.
So I'll tell you. So just get into the details. You got to get into the details.
It's a ridiculous thing to say.
The things that the FDA does have nothing to do with the law that Congress has passed. The things the EPA does to the coal industry have nothing to do, or the fossil fuel industry, have nothing to do with laws that Congress has passed. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the reason we don't have a new nuclear power plant in this country in 30 years has nothing to do with Congress stopping it. So if you tell the people of this country we don't have new nuclear energy for 30 years, you'd say, oh, well, the people we elect them out. It doesn't matter who you elect in or out. The fact has been the same for 30 years regardless. Because the real laws are made by the administrative state.
Okay, but you must know, and I'm with you, that we need more nuclear energy.
Yeah. And the reason we don't, it's not going to change because Congress passes a law.
The reason we don't is because people are, I think, look, I'm not going to say they're ignorant about this issue because, look, I've been on the fence about this one before. It's a complex issue. But I don't think they're paying too much attention to the idea that, yes, until we get to real green energy being the major part of our where we get our energy from, you're going to need nuclear. It's better than the other alternatives.
It's way better than the other alternatives.
I mean, the problem is when it goes bad, it goes very bad. It goes like end the world bad. Not so far that bad, but it could.
So you know what the irony is?
So don't fuck it up.
Well, you know what the irony is? So that NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that's stopping us from building new nuclear power plants, is in the name of safety. So in the United States right now, we have Gen 1 and Gen 2 reactors We don't really have many Gen 3 and we have no Gen 4. The only country with a Gen 4 reactor is China. Gen 4 and Gen 3 are way safer than Gen 1 and Gen 2. And so the irony is in the name of looking after the people and protecting them.
Yeah, no.
We actually have neither helped on innovation nor have helped on safety.
I mean,
where do you stand on nuclear, Ben?
Yeah, I'm actually, more or less on their side of this one. I tend to agree with points that are made by people like Lee Phillips and David Griscom on this. I think that if you're serious about decarbonization, which of course I know Vivek is not, to be honest, I think he likes nukes because he thinks that it triggers people. Because one in that thing he had where it's like, oh, here are my truths or whatever, that God is real and there are only two genders and all that stuff. One of them was fossil fuels are necessary for human flourishing, and which is fascinating because I guess we have a very limited time amount left for human flourishing if that's true. But yeah, I mean, look, I think decarbonization is the thing that's most important, and to the extent that going on nuclear can help with that, then I'm in favor of it. I mean, I'd like to nationalize it. I'm sure that would also be a point of disagreement with both of them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, Bill's not asking him how he feels about fossil fuels. They seem to be coming at it from I assume Bill's coming from a slightly more pro decarbonization outlook, you'd think, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that is a funny thing about this conversation, that it's like, okay, they might agree this is an energy source they should use more, but I think unless he's really changed his mind on this, Bill does think that climate change is a big deal, and it is kind of funny that you wouldn't know that from this conversation, that they have what I assume is this big disagreement about that.
Yeah, we should let it play, but sorry, what were you saying?
No, that was it. I mean, I just I think that I guess Bill kind of said it in passing. He was like, well, until we can get other green energy.
Yeah, that's why I was like, oh yeah, it seems, and then Vivek just let it go. I do think having fucking scissors is just it's getting a bit comical of what kind of ridiculous distracting props can he bring out while somebody it's gonna have a cheese grater eating a
I also wonder what the camera crew's instructions are here, because clearly they have multiple cameras. I mean, they are switching around. Does Bill think that it's sort of good atmosphere or something for him to be constantly doing that shit? Because it seems like it wouldn't be that hard to just pan away from him when he was doing it.
Yeah, and also why is it we want to make this camera angle look as if you're a peeping Tom that's looking through the window of Bill's basement at just a weird combination of two guys.
Yeah. Also, if this idea that Congress is just powerless before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, whose budget they're allocating, and not to mention just is enforcing laws they make. I mean, if they I think that one seems, yes, at best very wildly overstated, but but it's also kind of a shame that they got off on that so much, because the energy policy stuff matters, but kind of just making that part of this conservative base appeasing diatribe about the deep state, I think misses the real point. I mean, I think the really interesting argument to be had would be, okay, well, which energy sources do you think we should be using and which ones shouldn't we be? And as you say, I mean, they would presumably have big disagreements about that, and it would be nice for them to talk about that instead of just bonding about this.
Yeah. Do you agree that government is bloated, employs too many people? Do you think there's anything to that? I just never really. It's just not one of my big concerns, but clearly it's just something.
No, it's definitely not one of my big concerns. I mean, look, there are it's not that, I necessarily think everybody who works for a federal government agency has a job that should exist even necessarily like that. You have to take that case by case. But just saying there are a bunch of people who work for some agency, therefore that's bad. I mean, it's like, well, you kind of have to look at the details of that a la carte. And, obviously if you and I got the stuff that we want, I mean, I don't even mean like full socialism, just like sort of short-term reformist stuff that we wanted, then, the size of government would increase considerably. I mean, parts of it would decrease, the intelligence and military parts of it. But yeah, certainly the domestic size of government would increase a ton, and that'd be a good thing. And also, like, I don't know, I mean, like all this stuff about bureaucrats, like, it depends, right? Like, what are we actually talking about? If you're talking about there are complaints about bureaucrats that are right. That if you're talking about bureaucrats who are like gatekeeping ordinary people from getting stuff that they need, fair enough.
Right.
But like, there are a lot of instances in which, more bureaucracy is actually better. I mean, like certainly there's a lot of environmental enforcement that's actually way too minimal right now. Like before the Deepwater Horizon spill happened, like it came out that there was some absolutely ridiculous, like, 2-digit number of people who are in charge of inspecting like all of these different oil wells. And that is a problem, right? I mean, like I would love it if there were many, many, many more bureaucrats who were hired to do things like enforce workplace safety laws and, go around, and go around looking into, complaints about NLRB violations. I mean, the NLRB is like wildly underfunded. So yeah, I mean, there are at least like, I think just trying to settle it at that question of bureaucracy, good or bad, is a little bit demagogic. I mean, it's like there are things that people would likely be thinking of as bureaucracy that like employees of regulatory agencies where it's good to have more of it. I mean, even if you read Capital, Marx is, I think, rightly complaining in there about how few factory inspectors there were to enforce these laws, about against like, long hours and child labor and things like that. And that's, I mean, yeah, I mean, in that case, more bureaucracy would be good.
Yeah. And then obviously, not to put too fine a point on it, but all of this saying the real shadowy people who run the government. I mean, are these bureaucrats? Bill's right to say, okay, that's kind of a ridiculous exaggeration, but it also, takes attention away from capital and capitalists and big business. And, Vivek is willing to say that the Silicon Valley committed, one of the biggest election rigging of all time or whatever, but then he doesn't at all generalize that critique to capital in general. So I think it's very mystifying what he's doing, I think.
Absolutely. And also, if some Silicon Valley company is showing political bias in what rules it makes, then by and large, they're allowed to do that. That's just capitalism. Whereas if a government agency is showing political bias, you might actually have a legal case against them for doing it, that they're violating people's constitutional rights. And yeah, I mean, look, I generally tend to think that, I mean, if the look, I would like, I mean, again, I also just really want to know how the word bureaucrat is being used here. Yeah. Like what exactly does that mean? Does that just mean public employee? Or does it mean something much more specific? Like, does it mean a public employee who's exercising some kind of regulatory power? Well, depending on what the regulatory power is, we might actually want many more of those.
Right. All right.
Anyway, let's yep.
And then the FDA, by the way, is the same story. And so, Bill, all I would say is if you agree with me on this, you've got to be willing to actually gut.
Yes. And I'm telling you, I am a great focus group for you because I am a guy because I am a guy who is sympathetic to a lot of the things.
I appreciate that.
You're right. But then
So then let's roll this one forward.
Even when you're on the 2-yard line, you fuck it up.
Let's roll this one forward, Bill. Maybe right now, because we have no points on the board, maybe we just kick a field goal. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? It means you don't have to agree with 100% or close to 100%.
He's such a salesman.
In order to,
he's such a car salesman. Like, we don't quite have you there at the 2.5% rebate. I don't know anything about cars, by the way, but could I get you over that finish line if we also include a free CD player? Like, he's such a salesman. Bill loves him.
Yeah. I'd also point out, by the way, like, I guess just to, one, we did completely skip over, because we've been trying to play longer segments between pauses. We did completely skip over that beautiful moment where they bonded over how like labor unions are too powerful in France.
Yes.
But yes. Also, like, on the subject of bureaucracy, again, it's a slippery word. Means a lot of different things, but if you mean sort of just like administrative apparatus within an organization, then, hey, it is generally agreed by everybody that having Medicare for all, for example, would mean that there would be fewer people in health insurance administration than there are with a bunch of different competing companies. In fact, it's brought up sometimes as an objection to Medicare for all. Oh, what about the people who will lose their jobs?
Right.
And more generally, this is something that came up a couple of years ago in my debate with Charlie Kirk. Like, if the thing that you find grating when you think about bureaucrats or bureaucracy is just the idea of like some sort of gatekeeper saying no to things, then again, I would say it very much depends on the context, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But certainly, if you just don't want government bureaucrats to have power, that's your objection, then that's generally a reason to prefer universal programs to means-tested ones. That if you have a government program that's set up to only benefit people who can prove that they need help, then you've just empowered a bunch of bureaucratic gatekeepers to look at your particular case and and hold your fate in their hands to decide if you need, if like you really need help or not. Whereas if you have a universal program, something you have a right to just for being a person within the system, then you've actually disempowered those bureaucrats.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's just, my general priors would be that it's, our biggest problems are not that we have a few too many, government bureaucrats, considering, like, I mean, maybe we do in like in the military industrial complex, for example, and I think maybe Vivek would be willing to go there. But I do think it's and
like even with the military industrial complex and intelligence stuff, my big objection to it isn't they have too many pencil pushers on the payroll. Right? Like, it's like, look, if you could give me a meaner, leaner military industrial complex, I'd be okay with it. But this one's just too inefficient. You got to cut the payroll a little.
Yeah. That's a good point. All right, let's let them bring it home, I guess.
Just say half the job of a U.S. president is character.
True, but it's got to be more than 4.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. No, again, this is serious.
But I think it is more than 4 between you and I. That's my point.
I am a good focus group for you because I am a gettable guy.
80% of this country is, by the way.
But there are
you represent 80. You represent closer to the majority of the Democrat base than the people who are elected in office.
And a lot of this
comes down to the actual people.
A lot of us have to know that you're an actual patriot who believes in what America has always stood for, which is votes count.
I do.
We transfer power peacefully. We don't let a sore loser pretending to be some macho man cry.
So much
he
so.
cannot believe he lost the election.
I'm going to give you one that you and I will agree with potentially here.
I know you can't say it because you want to be his vice president.
I do not want to be his vice president, Bill. I already told you.
Well, okay, but maybe you'll change.
Honestly, the idea of working for somebody right now feels like a sharp poke in the eye. Like right now, that's the sensation I'm experiencing. I have not reported to somebody in over a decade.
I know.
And I just don't do well in that role.
But can I just say something on a personal level?
I got to tell you one thing.
And to help, I like you. I want to help you.
I like you back, brother.
I know, and I appreciate you making time to come in. I know, I appreciate it. And you are going to go a lot further. You're not at your floor.
Oh, we're just getting warmed up. Yeah, I think.
You're not at your floor. First of all, you're not at your peak.
You're going to appeal to young men, and young men tend right. I think that's the hardest people to get in the voting booth. They see a guy who looks like you, again, not rapping, but look, you dress sharp, you look like you could be at a club.
This is, what do they call this? Club Random we're at.
Right, we're at club, exactly.
So we literally are at a club right now.
Club. And they're going to see this guy who's young and he's fresh. And of course, they don't know anything, the kids. So like if you say get rid of the IRS, they're like, sure, I'm going to pay taxes one day. That's going to suck. Let's get rid of them. You know, and just the stuff that like, you're like a good version of Andrew Tate. You know, they're just going to like you. And that, I think you could excite a group of people that we haven't seen.
We want to bring young people along.
Right.
To care about this country.
Well,
I
yeah.
want to make patriotism cool again for young people.
Yes.
I want to make patriotism as a concept
can.
cool in this country.
And
you don't
by
have to
the
be
way,
ashamed of the American flag.
I hope this isn't.
It's cool.
I hope this isn't too personal, but I mean it in the best possible way. I think the fact that you are who you are, again, if we could just get rid of a little of the Trump stuff, and that you are a person of color is an advantage. I think it is the right moment. I think it's happening in the right party, a party that is very sort of, you know, they know that in the past, in the recent past, including sometimes the present, they are racist, and they have been. I mean, Reagan started his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which was a undeniable signal that he was okay with race.
Here's my situation.
So, but they're better than they were, and the fact that they like you, and I think they're going to like you a lot more. I mean, they're just getting to know you.
The people didn't know me like 6 months ago.
Right.
So here's the thing.
I think they're better than they used to be, but there's still a lot of racists.
I think that
in that party.
I think there's a lot of. I mean, what do you call racism when you say you want? You know, I mean, I'll give you a quote. The remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. That's racism too.
That's Kendi.
It's Kendi. You know it. You're all over it. So,
yes. Not down with that.
Look, if you're like a psychologist and you got a patient that comes in with anxiety, you don't shout them down by saying, "Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious."
Right.
They're going to have a bout of anxiety. I think where we are in this country with respect to racism, I'll use an analogy based on you know, lighting that and watching that, you know, taper out, is it's like the last burning embers of racism. That's where we are, actually. I'm serious. I'm just a visual person.
All right, I'll vote for you.
It's the last.
You got me with that one.
It really is. And so what I don't want to do is, right as that's burning out, I don't want to come in and throw kerosene on it by saying, "Don't be racist." That's what we'd be doing. So we're almost at the promised land. But
we may not be that close, but we are way.
We're a hair's trigger away from a national revival. We can be. It's not going to happen automatically.
You like my slogan? Let's live in the year we're living in.
Right? On that.
Isn't that great?
I'm with you on that.
Let's live in the year. That's all I ask.
And you know what else I'm going to do in this election is I promised some people I'm going to meet them as you know. So I got to probably roll pretty soon. But this is too fun for me. But here's the thing I will say in this election.
He knows that he's got to get out of there before.
And whoever the Democrat nominee is, Joe Biden or anybody else, I'll make a deal. The deal is shun super PAC money, and I will do the same thing. And I'll make the same deal in the Republican primary. Right now, the Republican primary, a big part of the problem is it's a super PAC primary. I mean, super PAC puppets, one after the other. I'm not playing that game. I'm putting my own money directly into the campaign.
I can't wait to see the debate with you and Christie and Trump.
And we're going to, okay, well, that's not going to be next week.
No,
it could be in a couple months, though.
I know, but you're in for sure.
Oh, I'm in for sure.
Because you're like number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So, and DeSantis. This is like must-see TV.
It's going to be kind of fun, right?
No, because like these guys are going to know they're in with a guy who can talk and think on his feet. I mean, we're
going to have fun.
Know, we're going to have fun.
Look, but what I would say is across the board, you know, laws are complicated on this and Citizens United, this and that. But if we do a handshake deal and say none of us are going to show up at fundraisers with super PACs or anything else, we're just done playing that game. That's another thing that will unite this country. This used to be a left-wing slogan. I think the right has a mood for this right now. So there's these.
But you know, we tried this a million times. You know, let's get money out
via the law.
Let's get
What
money.
I'm saying is let's actually do it through actually our norms
Oh,
and our
Like
practices.
Bernie
The laws
Sanders?
are complicated because of the First Amendment and
Well-
court, et cetera. But this election, that's something I will hold my promise to if the other candidates do. In the GOP primary, if everybody just agrees as a handshake agreement, we're just going to shun super PACs. And then I do the same thing in the general.
so
This is the stuff of uniting a country, man.
so where are you off to? When is your next event? Now you
So-
came from Iowa. I mean, you flew
I'm
right.
like all over I've been in like 6 states in the last
Today?
72 hours. No, 72 hours. But we're we got the debate next week, and it's my
What
first
debate?
time. The Republican debate.
That's next week.
First one's next Wednesday. A week from today.
Is Trump in?
Trump is in, but he won't show up, or he's supposedly not going to show up. But everybody else is. So DeSantis, myself, Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, all that. Christie, yeah, he's in too. So that'll be fun.
You
next Wednesday.
You and he. That's going to be the debate because he's the one who talks like I do about Trump.
Yeah. You know him? I haven't met him in
No,
person.
but Christie is a Trump attacker,
Yeah.
and you're a Trump defender. That's going to be the. It's going to be.
We'll have a healthy
interesting.
dialogue. Let's say that.
No. I mean, you're up against the champ there. As far as like a politician who can talk, he also can talk and think on his feet. So
I'm a first timer. He's experienced.
Take
Let's
your-
see how.
take your
Let's
ginseng
get
that
ready
night.
to roll, man. Yeah.
all
Thank you,
right.
man. It was good seeing you as
Yeah,
always.
too. I'm
enjoyed it.
glad that we can do this, not agree on everything, and we're still where we were.
We love
And
each
you'll-
other
you'll-
and we love this
Thanks,
country.
Exactly.
And like that's what America's about.
Okay.
So I appreciate that, brother.
Good luck out there.
Oh, that was beautiful.
Ben, can you let me share one short 1 minute clip? I have another
Yeah.
clip. Now that everybody's seen it, I want to show the intro to the Heidegger version.
Office hours.
Hi, Fred. So sorry, man.
No
What's going
problem.
on?
Good to see
Thank you
you.
for doing this.
Thank you for
Good to
having
see
me.
You, yes.
Yeah.
You got everything you need here. I got to get mic'd up.
All right.
Ugh. I had some fucking guys doing shit on my house up there, and they wouldn't let me get out of it. But anyway,
Well, maybe they'll watch this and they'll say, he's talking about us.
all right. And now, did you help yourself here?
I'm good.
You're good?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have a little of tequila here.
Oh, we got glasses down there. How do people sit here?
Whatever you want, whatever makes you happy, whatever is comfortable. Where's the ice?
I don't know.
Should have ice here. I don't see the ice. Oh, there it is.
He captured it. I think he's not even really exaggerating for how chaotic that it is on that show. Oh man, that was he got really hammered by the end. All right, so we did it to ourselves, Ben.
No, there is nobody nobody we can blame for this. This was a completely voluntary thing that we watched this entire conversation between the two greatest minds of our era, Bill Maher and Vivek Ramaswamy. It is kind of amazing, just like, okay, substantively, this is a guy who his most distinctive proposal is taking away millions of people's right to vote. He has, unfortunately, in the current Republican field, this is not remotely distinctive, but he has said all kinds of crazy shit about like taking drones to like blow up drug runners, as they're trying to get up to the Mexican border and things like that. None of that came up. They spent like 5 minutes talking about energy policy, and climate change didn't come up. This is just substantively, it's like a weird conversation on that level. But I have to say, just in terms of entertainment value, for me, the peak came in the first few minutes, like the zucchini opening and and Vivek trying to make points about the founding fathers while Bill did dazed and confused dialogue in response to it. Like I think it never quite reached that summit again in the rest of the conversation.
No, the middle got rather tedious for me. I really enjoyed the beginning was
amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Like, compared to his show, this was so much more entertaining. Because the fact is that he's popular enough that people have to fucking go on the show, and it's just a shit show. And the end, just for how fucked up he was, and how they had a bromance over union red tape, and I think they literally said bureaucracy at the same time, like in unison, like
oh my god.
Like they're slurping the same strand of spaghetti and meat for a kiss on bureaucracy. But it ended in a really entertaining way. I mean, he's like at number 2 right now. I don't think he's destined to get more than 10-11%, but he's at like number 2, I think, behind Trump. And Bill Maher is, one of the most important, or at least not important, maybe, but one of the most popular liberal commentators out there. So this was a real meeting of the minds. Shows where our country's at. In terms of subjecting ourselves to it, if it was all like the middle, I'd be pretty pissed off. But I think there's a lot of entertainment value, and I have to say, I would much rather watch Vivek than DeSantis any day of the week for entertainment value, because he is a weird mix of things.
No question about that. I mean, like, Vivek is, I definitely get what Strom meant in the chat when he said he's like just a glad-handing frat boy. Like, that is definitely a side of Vivek's presentation. And yeah, there are definitely some used car salesman aspects to the way he's trying to close Bill on
with a lot of flattery at the end there.
Oh my God, yeah, no, brother, I love you so much. You're so close to agreeing with me about this. The way he's politely pretending to ignore Bill, continually trying to turn the subject back to Trump. But like, Vivek is also just like, he has this spark of crazy to him that makes him interesting in a way that DeSantis just doesn't. I mean, like, DeSantis is evil, and like, honestly, he's done some really just beyond ghoulish things as governor in Florida, but he's also just very, very boring.
Yes.
Like, he's just an overgrown version of like the guy at some like booth at college trying to like recruit people into the Federalist Society.
Yeah. Whereas Vivek would be, at the booth rapping, getting rid of the FBI, and
while he's making the guys like actually working the booth a little bit like nervous and embarrassed.
Yeah, exactly. DeSantis is. Oh, by the way, I got like an alert on my phone. Fresh off the presses, is that Vivek is trafficking in 9/11 denial.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So,
which is also a subject that would be. Here we go. Politico. Vivek Ramaswamy's 9/11 comments merit scrutiny, which potentially would have been a really interesting subject for him and Bill to get into, because a moment that I actually remember vividly from many years ago on Real Time was when there was a 9/11 truther who was heckling the show, who like stood up and yelled out like, "What about Building 7" or something? And Bill got very, very mad at them and, was like telling security to kick their ass. And, and like, I think he actually got off stage to like yell. So, it seems like they, again, this is another interesting possible area of disagreement that was not explored.
Yeah, he claimed that he was misquoted, and then they released the audio. Yeah, yeah.
What does he say in the original audio? Oh no, here we go. The published audio. Ramaswamy then. Hold on. I think it's legitimate to say how many police, how many federal agents were on the plane that hit the Twin Towers. He told the Atlantic. Maybe the answer is 0. Probably is 0 for all I know, right? I have no reason to think it is anything but 0. That's a weird thing to say. Yeah. In the published audio, Ramaswamy then switches to discussing the necessity of a January 6th commission that investigate the full events of that day. The billionaire entrepreneur who's emerged, blah, 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 has made a significant part of his message about exposing the truth that the federal government has withheld from its citizens. Taken out of context, has previously questioned the government's report on the September 11th attacks. Do I believe the 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not. Look, I guess to be really to be really fair about this, like there are non-crazy things that he could, I guess, mean by that. That like the 9/11 Commission, that the published version was left out stuff about the Saudi connection or whatever. But I've got to say the thing about the cops on the planes makes it sound like a much crazier version of trutherism.
Yeah. I'm not even here to call him crazy. I'm just excited for this new chapter. Yeah.
Well said. All right, I can't argue with that.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think, and you know what, and I think even beyond the entertainment value, it was interesting to get a look into what the pet issues are that he's trying to get into, and I think for me, it inspires me to do a little bit more research into what are these weird, to me at least, weird conservative hangups? Where do they come from? I know that's Mr. McManus is a great scholar of all things going on with the right. So I'm sure I'd love to pick his brain about it. But it was interesting to see, the push and pull between kind of like a classic old man lib and this kind of weirdly, some new, some old fashioned conservative guy, and trying to drag each other to the issues they care about, and then finally meeting on some vague platitude bullshit. So it was. I'm happy that I watched the conversation. So I think it wasn't a total failure, I would say.
Yeah, no, that all sounds right to me. Yeah, I mean, I did think about Matt McManus when I first saw the video of Vivek doing the Eminem rap in Iowa. Just because Matt is, Matt has used this phrase so many times in the past, postmodern conservatism and, whatever. Yeah. I mean, this is just a vibe claim, not a substantive one, but just on a vibe level. I really felt like this is, this is a postmodern conservative moment.
Yeah. I think the conservatism, at least on vibes, is going to have to go in probably a somewhat new direction, right? So it's going to be horrifying, but maybe interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it is. I mean, honestly, whatever. I mean, it is very weird. It is very weird. I mean, obviously, to see the same guy who wants to deny 18 to 25-year-olds the right to vote and kill people at the Mexican border and all that stuff. Say, yeah, no, we should legalize weed, whatever. That's that is weird. I can remember.
And he's also like, and I want to get young people involved with politics. Which maybe he means, no, in the military, killing people abroad. but not doing that either, because we're involved in too many foreign entanglements. It's very like naughty, not naughty, naughty.
It's very naughty.
Like it's going it's going all these different directions. So it's interesting.
Yeah, he is trying to be a lot of things to a lot of people here. Or whatever, to some of the same very confused people who are going to be voting.
Basically, the overweight conservative college student, I think, is his number one constituency. That's why he's it's the identity politics of people
I mean, the
spending a
final
little too
thing
much time. Go ahead.
I really want to say here is, look, you're obviously right that they can't have Andy. His hands are full with what he's doing for this show and, and like his other projects. Maybe, okay, look, if Andy wants to dump some of his other commitments and keep GTAA, I guess Bill can have him, but like, I'm sure he'd pay way better than we do. But like, he's clearly not getting Andy level graphic design help.
No, when he said he had a lean operation, I believed him. I think it might be time for him to bulk up with some bureaucrats.
yeah, he needs to bulk up the operation.
A few pencil pushers to make it look like he has a competence.
Exactly. Also, if he has somebody in his lean operation who's responsible for making interior design choices, like there's a conversation to be had there that like the color stuff that was going on with those chairs, like that's that was really distracting.
It was distracting. And then also, a lot of design should be about functionality, right? So the chairs are too big for the people in them, and the table is too small for the alcohol and drugs on it. So it's like there's some basic changes where you get a bigger table and smaller chairs, and it's the feng shui is going to be a lot better. Did you see that? Exactly. Did you see what Richard?
And you are totally right about that camera angle they kept switching to, where like literally the brick wall was blocking part of the shot. Like that is too lean an operation.
Exactly. All right, Ben. What should the people look forward to?
All right. Well, the people should look forward to hearing, I hope tomorrow, the details of the Labor Day event in Chicago. That's going to be me, Bhaskar Sankara, Mike Beggs. It's going to be co-sponsored by Jacobin, and in these times, that is almost all the information I have right now, but I will certainly update people when we have more of it. Meanwhile, on Thursday, we are doing, for the Thursday night debate breakdown, we are going to be watching from the 2022 Holberg debate with John Mearsheimer and Carl Bildt on Ukraine, Russia, China, and the West. And that is going to be with Jordan Dubin and Deep State Cuba and C. Derek Varn. So I think that should be really fun. I think that should be a really good group of people for that particular debate. Again, that is coming up on Thursday. It's possible that I'll do maybe even a solo stream to do something on like Friday, maybe about the Republican debate. I haven't totally decided what to do with that yet. But certainly on Monday, if nothing changes, we got into this a little bit in the post game, what some of the possible complications would be, but if nothing changes, we are going to do a all four microphones used in studio in-person episode with Jordan and Jason Miles and Matt Chrisman. So that should be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to that if that comes together. So lots of good stuff to look forward to there. We'll see people then. Left is best.